as well being out, so there will be some pockets. Just drive carefully through any affected traffic lights. Northwest Province, the 511 remains closed for through travel between Brits and Tabazimbi. The road is closed between Besterkral and the provincial border that links northwest across into Limpopo. So you've got options: the 516, the Bila Bila Tabazimbi route, or the 510, the road that goes through Northam's reopened as well. Overnight tonight, driving into Durban, the N3 will be closed. It's a really big deal tonight between Pavilion Mall and Spaghetti Junction. The N3 into Durban will be closed from 8 p.m. until 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. That'll reverse on Wednesday night and close the outbound side. And pretty busy on the N2 into Cape Town this morning. Traffic basically all the way through from Khayelitsha towards the airport runway. Then straight away you're back in the traffic all the way through to the M5. The N1 looks busy as well, with traffic slow coming off Plattercliff Hill down towards Sable Roads. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. Soccer. Orlando Pirates coach Jose Rivero admits that the Betway Premiership table is looking dangerous, with Mamelodi Sundowns 12 points ahead. And in cricket action, Rachin Ravindra's century helping New Zealand book their place in the semi-finals of the Champions Trophy. All these sports stories and more at around 6:30.
The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
Today is Tuesday, the 25th of February 2025. It's just gone 8 minutes after 6. Hey, good morning and welcome to it, the Friday edition of the Morning Brief here on SAFM. I'm Thulasizwe Simelane and I'm here to deliver your Morning Brief. Come, let us spend the next 3 hours together informing and engaging each other and sharpening each other's perspectives on the key issues of the day. Here's what's coming up on the show. There has been widespread response, right? And in fact, debate is raging. Let me put it that way. Debate is raging about the comments made by a senior officer in the South African National Defence Force who raised concerns about the country's unprotected and porous borders. And he was emphasizing that South Africa's defense capabilities are compromised. This is Lieutenant General Nchabeni Mapaha, who made remarks during one of the funerals for the 14 South African soldiers who died during their engagement in the DRC. In fact, it's so important that you get the full context of this. He was delivering a speech with politicians in attendance, was Lieutenant General Nchabeni Mapaha. Take a listen to what he said, and then I'll tell you about the guest that we will have coming up to talk about this a bit later on.
A lot has been said about the South African National Defence Force not being well equipped, not being resourced and all that. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm saying and I'm appealing to the politicians that are here that next time you sit down and debate, think whether you are protected or not. Because that grant that you're giving to the people out there, the education of your children and everything else will not materialize if you're not protected. I'm sure many of you know that we are sharing our grants for the poor with people who are not supposed to share the grant. And that is because we are not protected. Our borders are porous. And they're porous because you, the politicians, have decided you want a Mickey Mouse Defense Force. I'm sorry to say that, and by the way, the Adjutant General is here. I'm protected. I'm not making a political speech, by the way.
Yeah, so he said he was not making a political statement, was Lieutenant General Nchabeni Mapaha. At about 10 to 7 this morning, we'll be talking to Dakota Lekwete, who is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans. But I do want to hear your views. Was he making a political statement, and was it wrong for a soldier in the SANDF to be making a political statement? on that platform, or was he speaking truth to power and calling the thing a thing? You and I agree that there's been severe underinvestment in our SANDF. Weigh in on that debate. The number to dial 086 000 2032. I'll take your WhatsApp voice notes. Please send them to 061 410 4107. In other news, I'll tell you this. Do you know how the prices of your health care are determined? Do you know what's the formula? What goes into thinking about how much you end up paying as you are sitting there on the doctor's chair and the doctor is pricking and prodding you? Do you know? Do you have a sense of how that is determined? Well, the reason I ask you this is that the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Pakstau, has published draft regulations that are meant to establish a kind of a framework and an exemption, a block exemption for healthcare providers and medical schemes to together, collectively among them, with some guidance from the Department of Health, of course, in the whole process to determine healthcare tariffs. The concern that has come through from the Competition Commission is that the costs of healthcare in this country are simply too high, and the way that is determined has been quite problematic for quite some time. There was a briefing yesterday that was addressed by the Minister of Health, who was addressing all of those issues. At about 20 to 7 this morning, I'll be in a conversation with Professor Alex van den Heever, and we'll be talking about those processes. There's been mixed reaction to that block exemption. You'll know that competition law in our country doesn't allow people who are competitors to collude and sort of agree on what is the price that we're going to charge. But there's going to be a block exemption from those provisions for at least 3 years to allow for a kind of systematic and perhaps more transparent way of determining those tariffs. Professor Alex van den Heever talking to me at about 20 to 7. Then in the second hour of the show at about 10 past 7, we'll be talking to Anusha Naidu. Anusha Naidu is the Chief Director for Human Resource Planning, Employment and Performance Management at the Department of Public Service and Administration. The issue that we'll be discussing is the revelation by the Department of Public Service and Administration that over 5,700 foreign nationals are employed within South Africa's public service, so in various sectors of the public service. The department says a significant portion of those workers hail from Zimbabwe, with additional workers coming from countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, India, Nigeria, Lesotho, and Cuba are among the countries that are leading. Mainly in departments such as health and education is where you find these professionals. So we'll talk to Anusha Naidu, the Chief Director at the Department of Public Service and Administration, to find out the rationale behind it and what checks and balances are in place. Lastly, let me mention my upcoming conversation with the South African Reserve Bank Governor, Lesetja Kganyago. He'll join me just after 7 a.m. and we'll be talking about the ongoing meeting of G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. So it's part of the work that South Africa is undertaking as president of the G20 in this year, 2025. So Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago joining me at about 10 past 7. All of your regulars, we have them locked and loaded for you once again this Tuesday morning. And Musa with your news updates every half hour. Rob Byrne with your traffic every 15 minutes or so. Zaikan is watching your sport throughout the morning. Ndauleng Lichela has your economics, business and market news covered. Sipho Mantula with your Africa update just before 8 a.m. And as I said, on all of these issues and more, your calls always welcome. The number to dial 086 000 2032. I'll take your WhatsApp voice notes on 061 410 4107. And of course, we are at SAFM Radio on all of our socials. On Facebook, we are SAFM Radio. Also live on our YouTube channel at SAFM Radio. This is SAFM. We are leading the conversations that move us. The first hour of the Tuesday edition of the Morning Brief starts now.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
Hey, Anne, good morning to you.
Good morning, Thulas.
I've been so energetic and raring to go. I didn't even pay attention to what's on your diary.
All good, all good.
I'm like
all
a
good.
child on a sugar rush.
All good. Well, jam-packed, lots happening today. The Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi outlining his plans to deal with challenges affecting the province during his State of the Province address yesterday, and he listed 13 problems and stressed the need for government, the private sector and communities to work together to address these challenges, also announcing that the province will soon have more new schools and hospitals, and this is part of the province's efforts to accelerate service delivery to its citizens. President Cyril Ramaphosa to address the opening of the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders in Parliament today. In his State of the Nation address, the President reasserted government's commitment to work with traditional leaders in the implementation of local development programs. The case regarding the impeached judge and Thulasizwe parliamentary leader Dr. John Hlophe, who is barred from the Judicial Service Commission, returns to the Western Cape High Court, and he's seeking a final order on the matter. The argument in this litigation being that for Dr. Hlophe to become a member of the JSC, it would be unconstitutional in that it would be inconsistent with the National Assembly's obligation to ensure independence, impartiality and dignity. Day 2 of the meeting of the G20 Deputy Finance Ministers and Deputy Reserve Bank Governors at the Cape Town International Convention Centre, and then South Africa's leadership, that's in science, technology and innovation, expected to take centre stage at the G20 meeting on research and innovation. The University of the Free State is hosting a 3-day G20 Research and Innovation Working Group meeting in Bloemfontein. Police have launched a manhunt for about more than 13 suspects who were involved in a cash-in-transit heist in Laudium west of Pretoria yesterday. 6 other suspects were killed during the shootout, and the Gauteng Deputy Provincial Commissioner believes that the suspects might be linked to a number of other robberies. The former Johannesburg Mayor, Kabelo Gwamanda, who is facing fraud charges, is back in the Protea Magistrates Court today, and the previous appearance was postponed. Gwamanda maintains his innocence, saying that the fraud charges against him are malicious and political. The youth of Mbombela, supported by various youth formations, they will be marching to the University of Mpumalanga to demand local people be prioritized, and this is when it comes to employment and economic opportunities at the universities. The group marched about 2 weeks ago, and they are going back because they believe that they are not happy with the response from the university regarding this issue. And lastly, the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, is today leading the official launch that's of the national campaign to enroll 1.1 million people in HIV treatment by December of this year. And this new campaign will be launched in collaboration with the South African National AIDS Council and other stakeholders in the health sector. It is part of the country's ongoing interventions to enhance an uptake of life-saving HIV treatment, and this to ensure that 95% of people that's diagnosed with HIV receive and adhere to the antiretroviral therapy in order to achieve viral suppression. So some of the stories that we're focusing on this morning.
And thank you for that. You'll be hearing from Ann Musa every half hour here on the Morning Brief with an update on those stories and a lot more.
Thulasizwe Simelane on the Morning Brief. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
So here's how your Tuesday weather is looking. There's just one warning from the South African Weather Service. It is a yellow level 1 warning. It says damaging wind resulting in difficulty in navigation at sea is expected between Cape Columbine and Cape Agulhas from around midday. The rest of your weather looks like this. Pretoria will be fine, becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon with a minimum of 16 and a maximum of 32. Johannesburg, fine, becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon, 17 to 29. Mbombela, partly cloudy, becoming cloudy in the evening, 17 to 29. Polokwane, partly cloudy, 16 to 29. Mahikeng will be partly cloudy with isolated showers and thunder showers, 20 to 33. Bloemfontein will be partly cloudy with isolated showers and thunder showers, 21 to 36. Kimberley will be partly cloudy with scattered showers and thunder showers, 23 to 38. Uppington will be partly cloudy with isolated showers and thunder showers, 23 to 41. Cape Town will be partly cloudy, becoming cloudy by the afternoon, and the minimum there will be 19 with a maximum of 26. George will be cloudy with scattered showers and rain, 19 to 23. Gqeberha will be cloudy with scattered showers and rain, 20 to 25. East London will be partly cloudy, becoming cloudy with isolated showers and thunder showers, 19 to 25. Durban will be partly cloudy, 20 to 29. Richards Bay, partly cloudy, 21 to 30. And finally, Pietermaritzburg will have morning fog, otherwise partly cloudy, 17 to 30.
V up your February with great value deals from Vodacom Business. Get the new Samsung Galaxy A16 on a Red Business 1.5 gig plan for 379 Rand per month over 24 months. Enhance your deal. Add 29 Rand extra per month over 24 months and get the Samsung Galaxy Fit 3. Available in-store and online. T's and C's apply. Further together. Vodacom Business.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
22 minutes after 6. Let's turn our attention to developments out of Germany now, where the Conservatives under Friedrich Merz vowed on Monday to quickly form a government after winning the national election. Merz's Christian Democratic Union faces tricky coalition talks and the prospect of an obstructive parliament after the far-right and far-left parties all received a high number of votes. As the parties try to find common ground, Germans are divided over migration, geopolitics, and the economy. Let's speak now to Musam Dunge, who is a political analyst and joins us now for that conversation. Good morning to you and thank you for your time this morning. So I look at the breakdown of the seats in the Bundestag following those elections. Yes. The CDU coming up tops in terms of the votes received, but it's not really an outright majority. So as happens in German elections, coalition talks are inevitable. Tell me about that story. What were we watching out for out of these elections?
Well, you know, these elections, thank you so much, Thulasizwe, for having me. Good morning to you and to the listeners. Mm-hmm. These elections were expected to produce a result where the CDU would come up on top. That was very much expected in terms of these elections. All the polling indicated that. What really was of interest here, Thulasizwe, was to see how would the governing SPD do, how would the far-right AfD do, and the other parties as well as the Greens. Those parties, how would they do in terms of the formulation of government? And now it is very clear that, you know, in order for the formulation of government to happen, it is likely that the SDU will look to the previous government's a leading party in order to form a government in terms of these elections, because it will probably be the most stable of governments. What we noticed in the previous administration is having a third party often brings instability in the kind of coalition and government you can form. And this time around, I think the SDU would probably like to learn lessons from the previous administration.
Yeah, so I mean the percentage breakdown from the chart that I'm looking at is CDU, CSU 28.52%. Then it's followed by the AfD, the far-right party, with 20.8%. And then the rest of the parties, the SPD of Olaf Scholz, who was the German chancellor until, you know, the elections, coming out third at 16.41%. But tell me about the story around the AfD, the far-right party. That was the story of these elections, wasn't it? And it has performed really well, being the second largest party.
Yes, that is the story of the election. They basically doubled their percentage gain in terms of these elections. But not only that, I mean, given the history of Germany, given the hesitation towards or the suspicion of far-right parties, given the history dating back to Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany, there were expectations that, you know, the AfD wouldn't do well. But unfortunately, as James Cleverly said in the 90s, the former Democrat strategist who ran Clinton's campaign, he said it's the economy, stupid. And basically, what he was alluding to is you can have a good campaign, great talk, but at the end of the day, if the economy is not doing well, it impacts on your messaging. And this was clear. The German economy has not been doing well for the past, say, 5 to 10 years, really. And in many ways, it being the engine of the European economy has been an ineffective engine. And in many ways, that has limited Germany's influence over European politics in a way that it had under Angela Merkel. And so the AfD's rise really comes at a point where many Germans, especially in East Germany, are complaining about being excluded from the main economic gains as established since the reunification of Germany in the early 90s. And so what we are seeing at Thulasizwe is the regional economic picture shaping the national politics. And that explains why now we have a far-right party that is more influential in German politics than ever before. It really boils down to the fall in the economy and how German people have reacted to that.
The AfD doing exceptionally well and rising, but unlikely to govern, Musa. Tell me about what they're calling a firewall that, basically the other parties have decided that they will form a firewall come what may. They may not like each other very much, but the firewall will ensure that they keep the AfD out of government.
Well, if you think about Thulasizwe, they're taking the approach that has often been taken in France, right? That keeps out the Le Pens of this world out of power, right, in France. And so the same sort of strategy finds expression in Germany, where by all intents and means, all the other parties will rally around trying to keep the AfD out of power. Now, that may be effective in keeping them out of power, but is it effective in governing? And that is then the question here, that can they build a coalition that's not just strong enough in keeping the AfD out of power, but in helping revive the German economy as the engine of the European economy? And, for all intents and purposes, Thulasizwe, it is the strength of the German economy that is the legitimacy by which Germany is able to provide leadership over European affairs. And so in many ways, that is the question here. Can we see a revived Germany in an era where the Americans are overlooking their European partners, are returning to Russia, and that has emboldened Vladimir Putin? Can a revived Germany refocus even America's foreign policy towards its traditional partners? And that is the question that the new government needs to answer, given the fact that Elon Musk, who is a very important member of the Trump government, has provided open public support for the AfD.
Yeah. Lastly, let's talk broadly European politics, Musa. There's been this pledge that has been made by EU countries such as the Baltic and Nordic countries, about showing extra support, military support to Ukraine on the third anniversary, as the third anniversary is marked of the war in Ukraine. Tell me about that, how that fits in with what we are seeing, almost a capitulation, really, on the part of the United States now, under the Trump administration, their position more and more mirroring the positions that Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin would like.
The consequence here, Thulasizwe, of Trump's foreign policy is that while before this time, it really was Macron who was pushing this idea of Europe having an independent sort of security arrangement that is independent of the United States. Now with these elections, the CDU are also arguing that Europe needs to be more independent in how it formulates its own security arrangements that ensures that it's able to support countries like Ukraine in absentia of the Americans. And so, these elections are quite consequential in terms of now bringing the two most important players in European politics, Germany and France, together on this most important agreement. Now, the question is going to be, Thulasizwe, will Italy's Meloni agree, who has a very strong relationship with Elon Musk, and the Trump administration. How about Hungary? They have a strong relationship with Trump. So Europe is quite divided currently. And it's going to be interesting to see which leaders will provide Europe the kind of leadership it needs to band together, especially in a time where America's foreign policy is so unpredictable.
Musa, thank you for your time. Always a pleasure talking to you. By the way, are you done conquering Dundee and the rest of the UK?
I have 1 more month, but I am in the country, so I look forward to seeing you.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's Musa Mtungede, who is a political analyst. Brings us to 6:30. Let's check in with N. Musa with the latest news headlines.
Good morning. Thanks to us. In the headlines, more than 13 suspects who were involved in a cash-in-transit heist in Laudium west of Pretoria last night are still at large. 6 other suspects were killed during the shootout. The matter dealing with impeached Judge John Hlophe, former Judge John Hlophe, is being barred from sitting on the Judicial Service Commission, will be back in the Western Cape High Court today. The DA, Freedom Under Law and Corruption Watch are seeking a final order on the matter. And Eskom has further downgraded its rolling blackouts from stage 4 to stage 2. It says this follows a successful recovery of all 5 units at Majuba, 2 units at Camden and 1 unit at Medupi. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's really very busy coming in from the south side of Joburg and going north. There's a breakdown on the N3 around Heldenay, so that's your first backlog out of Germiston and Alberton. Crash on the R59 at Michelle Avenue, so quite a big backlog coming into that through Swartkoppes Road. Crash on the Mike 1 north at Empire Road, so very heavy queues coming up that busy Mike 1, already pushing queues back to sort of Gold Reef City or Monday territory. Got a little police operation inside Deepcliff, so the N1 onto the N12 to Uncle Charlie's is being impacted. There's a breakdown on the N12 coming in past Lenasia towards Eldorado Park up towards Golden Highway, and of course in the middle of all that you've got the roadworks on the N1 at Crossmere causing delays as well. Looks like a busy Tuesday. If the N1 is a barometer from John Foster down to Olifantsfontein, that's already busy across all lanes. Driving into Durban from the south coast, a crash near Joyner Road, so very slow from sort of Galleria getting up and down Tweeny Hill on your way towards that collision scene. Just north of Cape Town, protesting at Witsands just on the southern side of Atlantis. That protest action has effectively blocked the R304. If you need to go in or out of Atlantis, it'll probably be the West Coast Road option and the R307 rather than the N7 access points, because they're all currently being blocked off as you get into that Witsand area. And Stellenbosch Arterial, quite a heavy queue this morning from Blackheath through Delft on your way very slowly towards Belhar. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Hey, good morning to you, Zai.
Good morning.
So let me use an analogy from running. There's a point where if you're watching a marathon and there's like 2, 3, 4 contenders, then you just see one starting to break and lead and lead. And it stretches and stretches. And you start seeing the second guy accepting that this guy has broken me. Is that what's happening with Jose Rivero here?
That's the perfect analogy.
As far as the league is concerned.
I don't know if he's looking at the log or the log is looking at him, but like you say, you know, I think that runner has bolted.
12 points
yes,
ahead. Yeah.
12 points ahead, admitting now that the table is dangerous. Sundowns, yes. Well, Pirates have 3 games in hand. Rivero warning, points need to be won before they can talk about a title race. The Buccaneers' schedule has been disrupted by fixture congestion and continental commitments, leaving them playing catch-up, while Sundowns continue to dominate and extend their lead. If they beat Sekhukhune United, they could lead by 15 points. Here's what Rivero had to say about the gap at the top.
But it can be something that for the fans, not for us. I want to think that not for us, but sometimes when you look at the table, I don't do it, I promise you. I used to have a look of the table in the last 4 or 5 games, maybe, to see some other, but I'm not a person who is permanently, doing the maths there, and there's nothing for me to gain with that. So I wish, but again, it's just a wish. There's nothing we can do. The league and the competitions are the way they are right now, and we just try to do our best in whichever game is coming.
In the meantime, Stellenbosch FC will be hunting 3 points in the chase for a top 3 Betway Premiership finish. They host Magesi FC at the Dani Craven Stadium in Stellenbosch this evening at 7:30. Cricket action, Rachin Ravindra century helping New Zealand book their place in the semi-finals of the Champions Trophy with a comfortable 5-wicket win over Bangladesh took place in Rawalpindi. Ravindra, who missed the Black Caps' opening win against Pakistan with concussion, struck 112 from 105 balls to steer his side to a target of 237 with 3.5 overs to spare. And finally, boxing, the former IBF Junior Featherweight World Champion Vuyani, the Beast Bungu, says he feels appreciated and respected for the first time since he retired in the early 2000s, following recognition from Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie. Bungu, the only South African to have defended his world title in a record 13 times, was one of the former world champions invited by McKenzie to Boxing South Africa's convention in East London. The minister promised to give them the respect they deserve.
What happened these last 2 days, by the sport department and the minister as well, it brought hopes to me, that really the boxing that I love most, the sport that I know best, is going to change at Rebellion. So, I was emotional, to feel that at the end, our own Minister of Sport is recognizing us.
Well, more sport, more boxing, and a lot more coming up for you at the top of the hour. For SFM, I'm Zai Khan.
The Business Update on SAFM.
Good morning to you, Ndauling Lechela. For the first update, let's start with China. Tell me about China seeking to attract a lot more foreign direct investment.
Morning, Tula. So we've been seeing the president of China, Xi Jinping, making an effort to try and rebuild relations with the private sector. Just last week, he met up with big tech firm CEOs, including Jack Ma. And this, of course, after years of tough regulation. And this time around, lawmakers released a 2025 action plan for stabilizing foreign investment, aiming to make it easier for foreign capital to invest in industries like telecommunications and biotechnology. The plan proposes clearer standards in government procurement and gradual opening of the education and culture sectors to foreign investment. Jens Exeland, who's the president of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China, welcomed the plan, stating that it could benefit foreign companies if fully implemented. Now, China's foreign direct investment has been declining, with a 13.4% drop in January, following a 27.1% plunge in 2024 and an 8% decrease in 2023. The action plan aims to reverse this trend by ensuring the implementation of measures to boost FDI confidence by the end of 2025, especially as we start seeing that economy recover. Concerns, however, remain about China's resolve to act on the plan and the impact of geopolitical tensions on foreign investment.
Tell me about this investment by Apple in the United States. Donald Trump will like this very much, won't he?
Very much. And it's interesting that it comes after the company's chief executive, Tim Cook, met up with Donald Trump last week. They've announced plans to invest about $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. As part of the investment, the company will open a new factory in Texas to produce servers for its AI technology. The factory will start operating next year and is set to create jobs as much as 20,000. And Apple says new employees will come across the US, focusing on research, development, software development, and AI. Of course, as I said, this move coming after Tim Cook met up with President Donald Trump. The iPhone maker has been facing pressure from the Trump administration over where it chooses to manufacture its products. Apple assembles most of its products in China. And it's also interesting to note that China is actually looking for more FDI, and here Apple is investing more in the US. So Apple further said its investment plan includes working with suppliers across the US, producing content for its Apple TV Plus streaming service in 20 states, and increasing its research and development spending. So overall, it just seems like Apple is just doubling down in the US.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about, why Donald Trump will be smiling at this announcement, especially because, it happens as China is looking for more FDI, and here it is going to the United States. Lastly, in Daoling, our first roundup of market activity for the morning.
So stocks in the U.S. closing mixed, mostly in the red, with the Dow Jones the only indice closing in the green. This comes, of course, after U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed that tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico will go forward when a month-long delay on their implementation expires. The same kind of sentiment playing out here at home, with the JSE in the red, the All-Share losing close to 1.7% in yesterday's trading session. This fueled by losses in the industrial 25, down over 3%. This was due to a downbeat finish from heavyweights, Naspers, and Prosus. Not much action playing out in the currency scene this morning, with the rand still stable. It's sitting at 18.36 to the dollar. And then over in Asia, markets mostly in negative territory as traders remain concerned about the lingering U.S. tariff threats and uncertainty about the outlook for global economic growth.
That's Ntauleng Lechela there with the first update of the morning. Look out for more of her insights. She'll be coming back just after 7:30 here on the Morning Brief.
With Ford's Blue Sky offers, get a new Ranger XL from just $5,899 per month, including our optional service plan, only when financed through Ford Credit. 10% deposit, prime list 4.75%, 40% residual. Visit your trusted Ford dealer today for Blue Sky offers, where our Ford Family Guarantee comes standard. Limited time offer while stocks last. Ford Credit is a registered credit provider and an authorized financial services provider. T&Cs apply.
Defending WAFCON champions are tackling Mehaladitwe in another glittering international friendly. Both nations describe their first match as the first half. Will Banyana Dr. Ellis dominate this 90 minutes, or will the beautiful flowers conquer the pitch battle? Witness the on-field grudge between Abu Makelwa, South Africa versus Lesotho on Tuesday, 25 February at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 2. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
17 minutes to 7 here on the Morning Brief. The exemption, let me tell you this story now. The Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Pak Stau, has introduced a concept for an interim exemption aimed at potentially lowering healthcare costs in South Africa. This exemption, which is still open for public comment, seeks to allow healthcare providers and stakeholders to collectively determine tariffs for services, treatment codes, and quality standards. Lots to take in. Let's speak to Professor Alex van den Heever, who is a Universal Healthcare Access Coalition Steering Committee member. Good morning to you, Prof. Thank you for your time. So it's a bit technical, but tell me about this exemption. What does it do exactly to try and address the high costs of healthcare delivery in South Africa?
Well, it purports to set up a multilateral negotiating forum for participants within the health sector to negotiate tariffs. But it also proposes that they negotiate codes and that they negotiate treatment protocols and things like that, which no recommendation has ever been made to suggest that a negotiating forum should do. So it's quite odd, and it also deviates from the health market inquiry recommendation. So this isn't what's been recommended in the past; it's something else. And it is quite odd because it's established in terms of an exemption framework to an act that has nothing to do with health policy. So it's unlikely to stand up in law. So it's a rather, to put it simply, a weird proposal. And what would have been preferred was what the health market inquiry actually did recommend, which was a structure which was properly statutory, which was set up as part of a positive policy framework in terms of health policy. That's not what this is.
But isn't it saved by the fact that it is interim, and perhaps with time we will achieve that structured method of negotiating tariffs? Because I don't think, Prof, that there can be any disagreement that the current mechanisms in place are inadequate, to say the least.
Well, this is not going to stand up, because it's actually potentially not lawful, because it's an exemption framework. So interim or temporary, it basically can't stand up to any kind of legal challenge, because an exemption in an act is not intended to set up a policy framework, which is what this tries to do. And it sets up quite a poor one. And the interim aspect to it is also quite peculiar, because it's not being proposed as an interim measure to, while they build something proper, which people have had quite a long time to do. They are actually saying it's interim because we won't need it in 3 years, because NHI will take over, which is not going to happen. So the whole concept is deeply flawed. But the actual design of the negotiating forum itself is doomed to failure, because the health market inquiry and previous recommendations that were made in 2010 by the Department of Health, that's how long ago proposals along these lines were made, and this minister has never implemented them, is that it proposed a structure that could determine tariffs on an annual basis. So that means it had to be designed in such a way that if there were disputes, they could be resolved very quickly without legal challenges. The framework that's been set up here allows for a political appointee to make a final determination on tariffs if there is a dispute. And it's very easy to arrange a dispute. So there will very likely be, even if there weren't a legal challenge on these provisions themselves, there would be a legal challenge every time somebody is tempted to make a determination on a set of tariffs. So not a single set of tariffs is likely to even emerge from the construct that is being created, because somebody will object and go to court and say, what was your reasoning for making that final determination? The framework that was previously proposed and is proposed in the health market inquiry doesn't allow for that. Not because it doesn't stop legal challenges, but it narrows the scope of what an adjudicator could look at in a dispute. So that's like technical issues, but they're quite important. It means that the idea that this is going to contain costs is nonsense. It won't do anything. It won't realize its objectives. But maybe the biggest point is that the health market inquiry did not recommend a framework to set prices in the system alone, because it recognizes that costs in the private sector are a combination of price and demand, volume. And the volume of demand, if you fix the prices, somebody can still make you come back for 3 visits, whereas you only needed 1. That part is a major part of the health market inquiry recommendations. That's the lion's share of where costs come to the system, and nothing is done.
In the short term, Prof, then, if this is, in your view, inadequate and potentially unlawful, what would have been an alternative path that would have the effect of lowering the cost of what ordinary patients pay at the point of service delivery?
So firstly, on price setting and fee-for-service arrangements, the framework that was proposed by the health market inquiry needs to be initiated as a normal legislative process with a bill introduced to Parliament, setting up the structure with a proper independent adjudication mechanism. That's the first issue. The second is that the rest of the health market inquiry needs to be, recommendations need to be implemented. If you don't, there's no control over real costs. You can fix prices at CPI for ad infinitum into the future, and costs will continue to rise. So unless you address the complete framework, which health market inquiry was clear on, it said you cannot introduce a partial measure. You must introduce it's making recommendations on an interconnected set of structural interventions. And if they are not implemented, a partial approach will have no effect on costs. So this is basically useless as a measure.
Sure.
Price recommendations need to be, a price negotiation framework needs to be implemented, but it needs to be a proper piece of legislation that everybody participates in, and then the full health market inquiry recommendations need to be implemented.
All right, Prof, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights this morning. That's Professor Alex van den Heever, who is a Universal Healthcare Access Coalition Steering Committee member.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Crash on Joburg M1 North, going up towards Bayers Nordia. Quite a heavy backlog through 14th Avenue towards that one. Earlier crash on the Mike 1 North at Empire is being cleared, but it's left a whole pile of traffic jammed up from Ormonde through to Parktown. A crash on the R59 North at Michelle Avenue, so delays from Swartkoppies Road. And the N3 at Spruitview, looking a touch on the sluggish side this morning up towards the Heidelberg Road junction. Over in Durban, earlier crash on the N2 northbound around Tweeny Hill. Looks like it's out of the way. Traffic is improving pretty quickly. It's busy in that area. It's busy, so might be something on the side of the road. Monzamtoti through towards Prospect, but it is appearing to move better than it was earlier today. Cape Town, Tableview with load shedding across the Tableview region. So routes like the Bayside Junction, that's West Coast Road, Marine Drive, Bloberg Road, and Marine Drive, or Otto Duplessis, if you like, that comes along the beachfront and takes you down Dolphin Beach. That's all heavy. Bloberg Road to Kuberg Road, Malabongwe towards the N7, Kuberg Road down to Montague Drive. It's all very busy. Load shedding next door to Tableview as well through Montague Gardens and next door at Bortasak. So lots of disruption out that way. The crash on the N2 inbound before Meway this morning, backlogging traffic through and passing Khayelitsha. The M3 worth a mention as well. It's super heavy, a lot worse than normal for motorists driving in from Takai, that queue before Constantia Main Road, all the way through to Paradise Road in the Bishop's Court area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Fizzy drinks and fruit juices can make our children sick. Sugar is dumped into their bodies with every sip, which could lead to obesity, heart disease, and diabetes as they age. We must protect them from drinks high in sugar. Demand a stricter health promotion levy now. Sign the petition on heala.org. That's HEALA.org.
Thulasizwe Simelane on SAFM.
8 minutes to 7. Debate is raging over the comments made by a senior officer in the South African National Defence Force at the weekend. Lieutenant General Nchabeni Mapaha has raised concerns about the country's unprotected and porous borders, emphasizing that South Africa's defence capabilities are compromised. He was speaking at the funeral of one of the soldiers who were killed in action in the DRC. Take a listen to what he had to say over the weekend.
A lot has been said about the South African National Defence Force not being well equipped, not being resourced and all that. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm saying, and I'm appealing to the politicians that are here, that next time you sit down and debate, think whether you are protected or not. Because that grant that you're giving to the people out there, the education of your children and everything else will not materialize if you're not protected. I'm sure many of you know that we are sharing our grants for the poor with people who are not supposed to share the grant. And that is because we are not protected. Our borders are porous. And they're porous because you, the politicians, have decided you want a Mickey Mouse Defence Force. I'm sorry to say that, and by the way, the Adjutant General is here, I'm protected. I'm not making a political speech, by the way.
All right, let's take the conversation forward then. Dakota Lekhwete is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans. Good morning to you and thank you for your time. A soldier straying into the domain of politics in an unacceptable manner, or a concerned patriot speaking truth to power and calling the thing a thing? Which one is it for you?
It's both of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's both in the sense that a senior officer spoke at the funeral of a fallen soldier who fell at the battlefront in DRC in defense of peace in the region and in the continent, and in line with our international law. Unfortunately, is that we are a constitutional democracy. In a constitutional democracy, the state can be sued or litigated for any negligence And in a constitutional democracy, all of us, including senior officers, will have to respect the constitution, uphold it, and also respect elected leaders. So the sense of occasion to raise this thing was not the correct one, but the content of the message from the general is correct. If it's raised in platforms like the Military Command Council, if it's raised with the minister and the deputy ministers, or even the president as the commander-in-chief. Because what, secondly, is very problematic is that we know from history that an unhappy soldier is a dangerous soldier. And it's a matter for serious concern in terms of our national security. If a senior officer can say with greatest unhappiness things that were said by the senior officer, even referring to our institutional arrangement as Mickey Mouse, it's a matter of concern, which I think the chief of the National Defence Force, the minister, deputy minister, or even the president will have to convene a meeting with all our generals and get their concerns, because a general by military doctrine or law is non-partisan. A general by military law or doctrine, it's somebody who must uphold and defend the constitution, the republic, sovereignty and integrity, as well as the territorial arrangement.
Sure.
Now, if a senior officer can enter, a senior officer also by military doctrine, it's supposed to respect the elected leaders. So if a senior officer can raise such concerns in public about his leadership, it's a problem and a matter for concern. And I think the minister and all relevant authorities needs to follow up, because we have not heard anything from even any of the generals from the.
What does follow up look like for you? What is supposed to follow following these comments and the concerns that you are raising?
Look, what needs to follow, it's for the executive, the minister, deputy minister, and all the military command council to meet and get to know what are the issues which are affecting our National Defence Force. We are blamed, I know, in Parliament, but we are blamed because we inherited. I'm only 5 months in office, but the problem of underfunding of the military, it has been there since after the problem of the arms deal, they normally referred to arms deal, which was a supply chain process in the Defence Force, where some NGOs and some in our society felt that the Defence Force is receiving a chunk of the money, but defense is one of the priorities of the state.
Right.
And it's a global practice that 2% it's allocated to the defense in the GDP by many nations. In our case, we are allocating 0.7% to the overall GDP to the defense force, which also undermine their ability to modernize their capability and also to be on par with their international countries.
Hold on for me a second there. Let's take a call from one of my listeners, Temba in Gqeberha, who wants to weigh in on our conversation. Temba, good morning. Short and sharp for me, please.
Good morning, sir. Look, let's first appreciate the general who had the guts to stand up and say what needed to be said at the right time. That's one thing. Jaketa Lokwada should be folding himself in shame that he decides to take the stance that he has taken on our behalf, and it's not supported by us. That's one thing that he should know. The army is in the state where it is because we did not care. We did not take care of it. We did not budget for it over a long time.
Let's leave it there then, Temba. Thank you. Mr. Lekwete, there's suggestion there that you should hang your head in shame because collectively, I know you're saying you've been there for 5 months only, but collectively, as the leadership that's been in government, especially the ANC, you've neglected investment in our National Defence Force. That's the suggestion from Temba.
Look, I appreciate the point that's raised by Temba. But Temba needs to know that generals or senior officers of the military, they are in charge of our arms and dangerous machines. The moment they raise other things in public, can send an unintended message, either of insubordination or insolence. And we know in other countries in the world what happened. The moment you have unhappy soldiers, because once you have an unhappy soldiers, it means it's dangerous environment that we're entering into. And it cannot be allowed from my point as the chair of the portfolio committee who needs to play oversight to ensure that South Africans are safe, both the territory and otherwise. So we can't allow it that senior officers can speak their mind when there's military doctrine and law which forbids them.
All right, let's leave it there. That's Dakota Lekwete. He is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans. Let's check in now with N. Musa with the latest news.
Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 30760. Now that's good news.
In the top stories, police hunt for more suspects after deadly heist shootout and Hlophe's JSC ban case back at the Western Cape High Court. Good morning. More than 13 suspects who were involved in a cash-in-transit heist in Laudium west of Pretoria last night are still at large. 6 other suspects were killed during the shootout. Police believe that the suspects might be linked to a number of other robberies. Gauteng Deputy Provincial Commissioner Major General Fred Kekana.
Those that are dead, we are going to take their fingerprints. Through fingerprints, we can link them with any other criminal activity where they are wanted or they were involved. Or, secondly, we'll also take their fingerprints will assist us to identify, to get their identity. And through their identity, we are going to continue to do more further profile of them. And out of that, more linkages will come out of that profiling.
The matter dealing with impeached Judge John Hlophe being barred from the sitting on the Judicial Service Commission, the JSC, will be back in the Western Cape High Court today. The DA, Freedom Under Law and Corruption Watch are seeking a final order on the matter. Last year, the court granted an interim order barring Hlophe from sitting on the JSC, the body responsible for interviewing candidates of judicial positions. Before being impeached, Hlophe, who is now a member of parliament, was the judge-president of the court. Chris Oxtoby of Freedom Under Law says it's unreasonable for Hlophe to sit on the very body that recommended that he be impeached.
This week's litigation is the second part of a court challenge that began last year. Freedom Under Law, the Democratic Alliance and Corruption Watch all brought legal challenges to the National Assembly's decision to designate Dr. John Hlophe as a member of the Judicial Service Commission. The reason for that challenge essentially is that Dr. Hlophe had been impeached as a judge for gross misconduct when he was found to have made an attempt to influence Constitutional Court judges in an earlier case involving former President Jacob Zuma. Broadly, the argument in this litigation.
Eskom has further downgraded its rolling blackouts from Stage 4 to Stage 2 with effect from 5 o'clock this morning. It says this follows a successful recovery of all 5 units at Majuba, 2 units at Camden and 1 unit at Medupi. 8 out of 10 generation units tripped at the weekend, forcing the power utility to implement Stage 3 rolling blackouts, and it quickly escalated them to Stage 6. Eskom then downgraded the rolling blackouts to Stage 4. The SACP says it wants an urgent consultative alliance to discuss requesting government consider sustainable alternatives in the 2025 budget. Parliament is preparing for the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's delivery of the budget policy statement on the 12th of next month. The SACP says following the meeting of its Politburo at the weekend, government must allocate sufficient resources to the South African Revenue Service. The party says it is opposed to the ANC proposed 2 percentage points VAT increase. The SACP's spokesperson, Dr. Alex Mashilo.
The alternatives we are calling for must also include stringent regulation of the capital account, a decisive clampdown on illicit financial flows, an aggressive confrontation of base erosion and profit shifting. We are calling for a wealth tax because South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world. We cannot pursue taxes that punish the poor while we leave the rich smile all the way to the bank. The Politburo called for an agent consultative alliance process and tasked the Secretariat to take a lead in implementing this call.
And finally, the UN Security Council has adopted a resolution calling for a swift end to the war between Ukraine and Russia. European countries sought to introduce amendments over concerns that the text neither mentioned Russia's aggression nor proposed a resolution to the conflict in line with the UN Charter. Showan Bryce Peace reports.
Russia and China voted with the United States on passing its one-line resolution, while 5 European countries, France, Denmark, Slovenia, Greece and the UK, abstained. France and the UK have not used their veto since 1989. It's unclear how the US-initiated legally binding resolution will move the peace process forward, as it contains very little of substance and makes no demands on the parties, but highlighted a widening approach to ending the war between traditional allies, the United States and Europe. The General Assembly earlier passed 2 competing texts, one from Ukraine and an amended text from the United States that called for a resolution to the conflict in line with the UN Charter and international law.
Recapping the top story, more than 13 suspects who were involved in a cash-in-transit heist in Lodium West of Pretoria yesterday are still at large. 6 other suspects were killed during the shootout. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 30754 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out.
This month, don't just treat yourself to some chocolates. You could also treat yourself to some great car insurance savings. Get a quote, and if Outsurance can't beat your car insurance premium, ask them for 500 Rand cash. And make that 1,500 Rand cash if you've been claim-free and with the same insurer for 3 years. Get monthly savings on your car insurance or cash in your pocket. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just a note on How Train this morning. Bus services currently suspended across Gauteng until further notice. So if you normally rely on the How Train bus, it's not going to come along this morning. Crash on the M1 North between 14th Avenue and Bayers Nordia. Quite heavy as you arrive into that scene coming up from Rudaport area. Breakdown on the N3 North near Heidelberg Road. So passing Sprayview on the run-in from Phosphorus, very heavily backed up. And plenty of traffic on the M1 this morning from Bruckfontein all the way down to the New Road exit. Durban's N2 North, if you're coming in off the South Coast area, quite busy this morning. Tweeny Hill up to Prospect, and there was an earlier crash which backed things up there. And then through from the cement factory towards Westwood Mall, there's really heavy backlogs on that section of the N2 highway as well today. Just north of Cape Town, the R304 closed on the southern side of Atlantis due to protesting, burning tyres. Quite a big crowd as well, just south of Atlantis. That's the 304. So if you need to get into that Atlantis area, you can't really get up through Mumra, you can't really get in off the N7. Use the R27, the West Coast Road, as your alternative in and out point, but be careful through the region. And Tableview with load shedding causing major delays across that entire region. Bloberg Road, West Coast Road, Malabongwe Drive, Kuberg Road, Gee, and Wood Drive, all very heavy through that Tableview area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM Sports headlines, it's cricket. The Proteas captain Themba Bavuma says they're feeling quite bullish ahead of today's Champions Trophy clash with Australia. And we've got soccer news. Manchester United expects to make a further 200 jobs redundant. Let's find out more at around 7:30.
The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
9 minutes after 7 on this Tuesday. Welcome to the second hour of the Morning Brief here on SAFM. A quick run through what's coming up. In the next few minutes, I'm in conversation with the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Lesetja Kganyago. We'll be talking all things G20 and the finance track meetings that are underway at the moment. Then after that, I'll tell you about the Department of Public Service and Administration revealing that some 5,700 foreign nationals are employed within South Africa's public service. I'll be in conversation with Anusha Naidu, the Chief Director at the Department of Public Service and Administration. And then a bit later on, we'll return to that conversation around the G20, reflecting on the recent foreign ministers meeting with Adrian Saville and just looking back at what was achieved and what the role of South Africa is in leading some of those conversations. That and a whole lot more coming up. This is SAFM. We are leading the conversations that move us. The second hour of the Tuesday edition of the Morning Brief starts now.
There's a song that goes, "Money can't buy me love." And that's true. But then they told us all you need is love, which anybody with a mortgage will tell you most certainly is not true. Love won't pay your parking tickets or your student loan. It's also needy. It requires effort, availability, constant care. But more importantly, love requires time. And while money can't buy you love, it can certainly free up some of your time. Time to spend on the things you love, with the people you love. And if you're looking, maybe even time to find the one you love. That's why, after 50 years of investing, we've learned that time is the greatest gift of all. And the good news is, if you invest early, time gives you money. And then money gives you more time to do the things you love. And don't you love that about investing? Ellen Gray, long-term investing. Ellen Gray is an authorized FSP.
Honey, what are you doing?
I'm stretching for tonight.
I thought you're not dancing at bachelorette parties anymore.
Baby, we need the money to put Johnny through matric mos.
And what's the police uniform for?
The clients feel safer when I wear it.
No, man, just sell your bucky to We Buy Cars. They give the best prices and they pay you within minutes.
Okay, but can I just go and dance one more time, please? You know how much I love it.
No, the buyer's already on his way here.
Wow, okay.
Strapped for cash? Just sell your vehicle to We Buy Cars. The easiest way to sell your car by far.
Defending WAFCON champions are tackling Mehaladitwe in another glittering international friendly. Both nations describe their first match as the first half. Will Banyana Dr. Ellis dominate this 90 minutes, or will the beautiful flowers conquer the pitch battle? Witness the on-field grudge between Abu Makelwan, South Africa versus Lesotho on Tuesday, 25 February at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 2. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane.
13 minutes after 7. Finance ministers and central bank governors from G20 nations are gathered in Cape Town this week for the G20 finance track meetings. The meetings are part of the year-long program of work South Africa is leading as current G20 president. Taking center stage at these meetings are global economic and financial challenges, as well as constraints to growth in developing countries, particularly on the African continent. Let's speak now to the South African Reserve Bank Governor, Lesetja Kganyago. Governor, good morning and thank you for your time. It is billed as the finance track set of meetings as a gathering that focuses on fostering global economic stability, enhancing international financial cooperation, and addressing pressing global challenges. Kind of hard to do in this topsy-turvy geopolitical landscape, isn't it?
Well, the finance track is the most important track of the G20 because that is where the G20 originated in the aftermath of the Argentinian debt crisis. And it had worked well even before the G20 was elevated to the head of state level. And when the great financial crisis set in 2007, 2008, the G20 was elevated to the heads of state level. And so, as you were talking about the geopolitics, the appropriate people to deal with the geopolitics are indeed the presidents, or as we call them in the G20, the leaders of the G20.
So as you gather then, it's a gathering right now of deputy governors of central banks and finance ministers. Then, of course, the central bank governors themselves are involved in some of those meetings. Where are you looking for storm clouds in as far as the global economy is concerned? Are you still looking at the pressures of inflation and the measures taken around the world to deal with that, as well as the fiscal challenges of various territories around the world?
Those are like three questions rolled in one.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very important to start with what is important for central banks and central bank governors in particular. In the midst of the COVID pandemic, the course of action by central banks and treasuries to some extent was to put stimulus to cushion the economies from the COVID shock. Central banks relaxed monetary policy, took extraordinary measures to deal with the pandemic. Treasuries expanded deficits, which meant that they had to borrow more, and that provided the stimulus. The response to COVID was the great lockdown, and that lockdown meant that global supply chains were disrupted. And as the economies were reopening from 2021, given the stimulus that you have heard from various countries, it was in no doubt expected that inflation would rise. And the emerging market central banks were the earlier one to pick up that inflation is starting to rise. And they responded, and the first ones to respond being the Latin Americans. And so central banks acted, but without a doubt there is an agreement that the central banks of the advanced economies acted late in the great inflation of 2022. And so what you have had now has been that central banks had to act with resolve from 2022, and getting into 2023 and 2024, we saw that the global supply chains were being reopened, and you could say that inflation was pushed back towards target. And in these conversations now, the concern among central banks is there a risk that central banks may take their eyes off the ball again, because it looks like, yes, we have controlled inflation, but there are indications that inflation might start to rise again. And this links up to your other two questions. One being fiscal, that the ministers of finance must deal with, that debt positions remained elevated from COVID.
Sure.
And ministers of finance were supposed to make adjustments after the COVID shock. And the conversations that are going on is to ask the question, have they made the right adjustments as required? And lastly, we talked about the geopolitics. And the geopolitics then adds to the uncertainty, because the measures that are being taken are actually could result in a resurgence in inflation, measures such as protectionism and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. You take me to my next point, Governor. How concerned are you about what seems to be a growing protectionist poise in trade relations between countries, particularly as the United States takes the positions that it takes around imposing tariffs all round, really, and spreading them all round, but these other countries as well finding themselves feeling almost impelled to actually respond in kind?
Well, I'm not sure that is responding in kind, but if you impose tariffs, you must expect that the other countries will respond. And those countries might respond through tariffs or respond through other measures. And an interesting posture here is that when you actually impose tariffs, you are imposing costs on the consumers as a country that is actually imposing tariffs. It raises costs for the consumers, and by definition would lead to a rise in inflation. And if the other countries respond with the countermeasures, you might end up in this never-ending game where one country imposes tariffs and the other one responds like that. And that is not good for the global economy because it hampers global trade, and global trade is the lifeblood of the global economy.
And lastly then, Governor, let me ask you to comment on this issues closer to home then. Your main area of focus and domain is monetary policy, but you are not an uninterested observer as far as the fiscal policy is concerned. Last week, we were meant to have the budget speech delivered by the finance minister, but there was that disagreement within the governing coalition in government that resulted in a postponement, which is extraordinary on its own. Are you concerned at all by this development, or do you see it as natural workings of this kind of governing arrangement?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, I think that so the uncertainty, but there are provisions in the law should there not be an agreement on what can be done. Government could continue to function. But we have seen these things take place elsewhere in the world. In the U.S., the government got closed a couple of times because there was no agreement on the budget. In Europe, we have seen governments that has actually fallen because there couldn't be an agreement on the budget. So these things are happening in the best of democracies. It is a shock for us as South Africans because it's the first time that it has happened in our democratic dispensation.
But I guess what I'm asking, does it concern you as far as it has impact on investor sentiment and confidence?
Well, I'm not sure that it has impacted on investor sentiment as yet. It does add to the uncertainty, but I think so far the government has communicated well, and they didn't just postpone the budget. The government gave us a date to say you will have a new budget table on the 12th of March, and that brings back the element of certainty in the.
All right, Governor, I know you've got to go. Thank you for your time this morning. That is Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Lesetja Kganyago. Professor Adrian Saville has been listening to that, and in a moment I'll be in conversation with the Prof to unpack it all.
In business, a rand saved is a rand earned. And almost 100,000 businesses trust OUTsurance.
We're in the security industry. Every month we save 1,488 rand with OUTsurance. Just having made the switch from our previous service provider to OUTsurance has allowed us to put another vehicle onto our fleet.
For your business insurance, contact OUTsurance to see how much your business could save. SMS quote to 43328 for immediate cover, or visit outsurance.co.za today. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
All right, let's continue our conversations around the G20 and the various meetings that have been taking place. Professor Adrian Saville, who is a professor in economics, finance and strategy at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, GIBS, joins me now for that conversation. Good morning to you, Prof. Let me rewind it back and take a few steps back before we come back to the finance track. Let's go back and reflect on the meeting that took place last week, which was observed quite closely and quite significant, the G20 foreign ministers meeting. Geopolitics is the word of the moment, the operational phrase. The US not taking part at the highest level, South Africa's leadership taking center stage. Was anything done that advanced South Africa's presidency of the G20 and even the G20's agenda on its own, despite the US's non-participation at the highest level?
In the greater scheme of things, Thulasizwe, I think my short answer is not really. I think it's material that South Africa is the site, the convening site of these important countries and key decision makers. But beyond the fact that we were the host of the site, or the site of hosting this important convention, nothing material, that stands out to me and says, here we made significant strides or substantial ground in resolving or addressing or squaring up to issue A, B, or C. So unfortunately, I wish my answer was a compelling yes. It's not.
Was that a product of the parties and countries that were in the room perhaps losing momentum because they know that this other significant player that will inevitably be or need to be a part of the conversation is simply not participating? And how long can that stymie the agenda of the G20 then?
I would say that it would almost, it has to, by definition, almost permanently stymie the performance and the engagement of the G20 if the single biggest member, measured in different ways, but the single biggest member is just not at the table. This is, put it in a business setting, this is like, a whole bunch of shareholders or suppliers or employees having, a deep engaged conversation, but the person that's responsible for ultimately taking the decision or influencing, having huge impact and influence on the decision isn't at the table. And I think, as much as we can zoom in on the goings on in the G20 or perhaps the G19, I think it equips us in this setting to actually zoom out and pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the United States, where there is cage rattling around important institutions that are critical to the structure and functioning of that economy and its political arrangements.
You were at that meeting and you were attending the meetings around the G20 foreign ministers meeting. Did you observe the sort of shifting sands with the EU and Europe in general sort of stepping up? And
no,
perhaps...
sorry, Thulasizwe,
yes.
I need to. I didn't attend that. I didn't attend that meeting.
Okay,
I wouldn't be able to comment.
Okay, but is it something that is being observed, that in the gap that is being left by the US stepping back, the EU is stepping up? For instance, the expressions of support for South Africa's presidency by countries such as China, and talk of more cooperation between the global South and the EU and Europe in general.
Listening to the governor speak or discuss this with you just before our conversation now, an important point was made, and that point is around what economists refer to as game theory or game strategy. And the US has, interestingly, put pressure on Europe in particular to step up its military spending, to coalesce against the other, and we can leave the conversation of who the other is to another time, but coalesce, align with the United States. And I think, interestingly, Europe's response hasn't been in favor of the United States, but rather because of the United States. And I think the President of the United States has made a rather interesting step, and maybe in the fullness of time, a misstep. Europe in and of itself, all of that said, Europe, in and of itself is an incredibly difficult arrangement to try and get coordination and cohesion. I would venture that the thing to keep a close eye on, a helpful barometer, is just a single statistic, and it's spending on military as a percentage of GDP. And inside of Europe, unsurprisingly, there are three very, very big spenders as a percentage of GDP, Russia, Ukraine, and Poland. And I think that speaks absolute volumes about fragilities in the global geopolitical arrangement.
So just talking now about the meeting that's now currently ongoing, the finance track, and it seeks to deal with issues of global economic challenges, and I was asking the governor a few minutes ago where they are looking for the next storm clouds as far as the global economy is concerned. Where, in your view, will those storm clouds come from? Will they come from the seeming protectionist poise and the spiral that it might trigger?
That's a very obvious place to go. That the tariffs and a tit-for-tat response to tariff imposition is an obvious source of inflation. The other is the financing requirements, where we've got increasingly, there's nothing new about this, but it is just a persistent escalation in debt to GDP, ongoing budget deficits in order to keep economies rumbling along, and those deficits and debt cocktail is increasingly worrying, using sort of conventional measures of economic risk and performance. These numbers in many places are off the charts. Japan is the obvious case in point. United States has joined the European mix with debt to GDP of greater than 100%, and notwithstanding the fact that you've got this very elevated debt and soon refinancing requirements, which will bring a fresh round of budget challenges, this just really hasn't been addressed in the greater scheme of things.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time this morning. That's Professor Adrian Saville, who is a professor in economics, finance and strategy at the Gordon Institute of Business Science. Brings us to 7:30, and Musa on standby with the latest news headlines.
Good morning. Thanks to us. In the headlines, the South African Medical Association Trade Union has criticized the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, for attributing the high cost of private healthcare to a lack of regulation. In a media briefing yesterday, the minister delivered the Health Market Inquiry report. Police are still searching for more than 13 suspects who were involved in a cash-in-transit heist in Laudium, west of Pretoria. And the matter dealing with impeached Judge John Hlophe being barred from sitting on the Judicial Service Commission will be back in the Western Cape High Court today. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Heavy across Pretoria West, Boysons, Claremont area as well. You find the Hoffs from Hagens, Bremer Street. There's load shedding there until 8 a.m. this morning. Also load shedding in the central Centurion area, Vreda Park, Littleton, Manor, Henob. So extra spice about proceedings out that way today. Cedar Road going out of four ways towards Dane Fern. Pretty heavy. There's a lot of traffic lights out on Cedar Road, but there's a really big backlog this morning. If you're trying to get sort of direction Chartwell, if you like. Staying in four ways, a crash on Vidkoppen at Leslie Drive, holding traffic on your way out towards the Sunning Hill side. The N1 North, a collision before Bayers Nordia. All lanes are open, but pretty sluggish coming through from 14th Avenue. And the N1 North, there's a lot of traffic today coming up from Crossmere Services, basically through Deepcliff to Uncle Charlie's. There's the long-term roadworks at Crossmere, and then a police operation inside Uncle Charlie's causing those delays. Durban, the M7, North Dean, North Park up towards St John's Avenue Bridge is heavy. A breakdown in the roadworks mix on the N2 North at Spaghetti Junction, so that's heavy. That's a queue this morning pushing all the way back to Cement Factory territory. And before you get caught in that, there's also some quite sluggish traffic around Tweeny Hill, so you've got two big queues to work through on your way up the N2 towards Mgeta Road. Cape Town, major delays on the N7. It's queuing from the N2 highway through Lunga, through Epping, through Goodwood, right up towards Franz Conradi Drive. Tableview is a mess with load shedding there. Multiple routes affected, multiple delays. And don't forget the protesting just south of Atlantis at Witsam. Avoid the R304 between Mumra and Atlantis. Go West Coast Road and R307 as your alternatives. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Hey, good morning to you once again, Zai. It's all going down in Rawalpindi in Pakistan, right?
Mhm.
And the captain is feeling quite bullish there.
I'm hoping he's ready to charge
Yeah.
and not be caught like a deer in the headlights. But listen, let's just say it's Australia. It almost feels like the final, before the final. That's how big this match has been dubbed. And yes, the Proteas feeling quite bullish ahead of this encounter. 11 a.m. is when the first ball will be bowled. Both teams, the Proteas and Australia, well, they have been unbeaten. So this Group B showdown could decide who marches into the semi-finals. South Africa is riding high after thrashing Afghanistan. History is on their side, having beaten Australia in 4 of their last 5 meetings. But the Aussies won't be an easy target. Here's our captain, Themba Bavuma.
Any Australian outfit that comes together for an ICC event is always one that you don't take lightly. Yes, they don't have I guess, their mainstay bowling attack. But I think they still have enough, to be successful as a team.
More cricket action. Rachin Ravindra's century helping New Zealand book their place in the semi-finals. They had a comfortable 5-wicket win over Bangladesh in Rawalpindi. Here's Ravindra.
There are definitely times where I struggled for timing. They strung dot balls, they bowled really well, didn't give any width and balls to score off. But I think it's the beauty of batting, and one-day cricket especially, you go through ebbs and flows over a long period of time. In the longer formats, it goes sort of like this, and you have periods of being able to score freely, you have periods where you don't, and I was able to lean on Tommy a lot through those periods, and we kept each other accountable and knowing what our options are.
Orlando Pirates coach Jose Rivero admitting that the Betway Premiership log table is dangerous, with Mamelodi Sundowns 12 points ahead, while Pirates have 3 games in hand. Rivero warns that points need to be won before they can talk about a title race. The Buccaneers schedule has been disrupted by fixture congestion and continental commitments, leaving them playing catch-up. Now, Pirates were scheduled to play Royal AM this week, but given Thulasizwe's impending sale to resolve their tax issues, the match currently has no new date. Here's Rivero.
Right now, all with the same number of games and without this type of inconveniences, but these things sometimes happen in the competition. We have to accept it, not spend so much time thinking about things that are not going to happen anymore, and just try to look at the next game. The next game so far it looks is going to be Marumo Gallants in Bloemfontein on Saturday, and again another final for us to prepare.
More soccer news. Manchester United expects to make up to a further 200 jobs redundant as part of cost-cutting measures after 5 straight years of losses. United made around 250 roles redundant in their first waves of saving last year after British billionaire Jim Ratcliffe paid $1.3 billion for an initial 25% stake in the club and assumed control of its soccer operations. Now, as part of what United has called a transformation plan, the club anticipates approximately 200 jobs may be made redundant, subject to a consultation process with employees. And finally, tennis action. Giovanni Mpeshe Pericard of France advanced to the second round of the Dubai Open with a 6-3, 7-6 victory over China's Xi Zhenjiang, and Stefano Tsitsipas continued his winning ways, defeating Italy's Lorenzo Sonego 7-6, 6-3. More sport on the Morning Brief. We'll rally back. Top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
The Business Update on SAFM.
Hey, Ndaulen, good morning to you once again. Tell me about Sasol ditching its LNG plans. Is that something to be concerned about?
Not necessarily. It's just that we need to know what they're going to replace the LNG with as they try to cut down on their carbon emissions. So the petrochemicals group has abandoned plans to use LNG to reduce its reliance on coal at its Secunda facility, the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter. The company pointed to high costs as the reason for this decision. According to Sasol CEO Simon Baloyi, the price of LNG has become expensive, especially after the Ukraine war led to a surge in prices. Now, as a result, Sasol has opted to focus on other alternatives such as renewable energy, sustainable feedstocks, and carbon offsets. The Secunda facility converts coal into liquid synthetic fuels, but its coal to liquid processes limit its ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, Sasol has committed to reducing its emissions by 30% by 2030, but the company acknowledges that this will require big changes. Now, this announcement comes alongside its half-year results, the group reporting double-digit declines in profit due to downbeat oil prices and lower sales volumes. The group also had to take an impairment hit of 5 billion rands in the 6 months ended December, and this follows a hefty 35 billion rand impairment in 2023.
And ever so often, Dowling, the weather makes the news in general. But in this case, you're telling us about how the recent rains, have affected the operations of the Limpopo operations of Amplats.
That's right, Thulas. And while the agri-sector welcomed last week's rains, it's not so welcomed in the mining industry. That's as Anglo American Platinum had to stop operations at its Amandelbult complex due to the weather conditions. The week-long rains flooded the Tumela mine, forcing its closure, but operations at the Dishaba mine resumed on Monday. According to Amplats, the region experienced unusually high rainfall, causing nearby rivers to overflow and the Beerspruit Dam to collapse. This led to flooding at the Tumela mine, overwhelming its pumping system. Now, Tumela, which contributes about 10% of the group's total monthly production, remains suspended. Fortunately, the company's emergency plans ensured the safe evacuation of all employees and contractors. Now, despite the temporary setback, Amplats does not expect the flooding to impact its 2025 production targets.
All right, please give us another roundup of market activity here at home and elsewhere in the world. And Tauling?
Kicking things off in Asia, those markets sinking deeper into the red this morning as trade jitters continue to spook investors. The Japanese Nikkei taking the biggest hit on that front, losing 1.3%. Meanwhile, in the US, futures surprisingly in the green despite yesterday's downbeat close. Investors on that end are eyeing Nvidia's results. Those numbers out tomorrow. And then coming back home, the JSE starting the week on a sour note, closing in the red in yesterday's trading session. The all share shading close to 1.7%. The rand this morning remaining quite stable at 18.36 to the dollar.
All right, that's Ntauling Lichela there. You can expect her to come back with another update for you just after 8:30, in which she will then give you a sense of how the day will shape up in the markets on this Tuesday.
In business, a rand saved is a rand earned, and almost 100,000 businesses trust Outsurance.
I'm in tourism. I'm running a guest house here. When I switched over to Outsurance, it was very simple and convenient. I used the savings to subsidize my solar installations. Switching to Outsurance was one of the best decisions I made insurance-wise, yes.
For your business insurance, contact Outsurance to see how much your business could save. SMS quote to 43328 for immediate cover, or visit outsurance.co.za today. A licensed insurer in FSP. T's and C's online.
Africa Update on SAFM.
All right, let's turn to Sipho Mandula for that. Good morning to you, Raz. Let's start with an update on the Kenyan deployment of police officers to Haiti, battling gangs there. There's an update and a loss of life there.
Refreshing morning, Thulas and Jump Africa to the listeners. Indeed, Thulas, what we are picking up from Port-au-Prince in Haiti is the killing of the Kenyan officer who has been deployed there as part of the 600 soldiers who have been deployed in Haiti. This incident happened in the Atibonite region where the Kenyan forces were engaged in operation to deal with the gang violence. Remember, Thulas, this mission is a UN support mission. It is not a peacekeeping mission, and this has happened since the assassination of President Juvenal Moise in 2021. And as you know, Kenyans, they've been beefing up, but they are still struggling to contain those gangsters in Haiti. And you'll remember, this gangster, it is called the Grand Grid Gang. You still have barbecue also operating in Haiti with the government of Haiti, and at the same time with this multinational support mission in Haiti.
So the UN Human Rights Council has been hearing from the Prime Minister of the DRC, and she's been talking about the numbers of people that have died since the fighting escalated in the last few months.
This is very important. As you know, that many ministers of international relations, they are in Geneva now, taking cue from Ronald Lamola yesterday. But the Prime Minister of DRC, Judith Suminwa, raising the numbers that are very worrying, that 7,000 people have been killed since January 2025, 2,500 bodies without identification. And as he's raising these alarming numbers, he's raising the role of the United Nations. He's raising that moving from North Kivu to South Kivu, it has also exacerbated this issue of M23 against government and the significance of mass civilians losing their lives. And that's how, when he's reporting before the UN Human Rights Council to us, is to look at what we will always say is the horrifying human rights abuses that have happened in the Eastern DRC. Just within a space of a month to us, we lose more than 7,000 people.
Speaking of the DRC, we've been hearing from its former president, Joseph Kabila, and he has some strong words, if not unkind words, for his successor, Felix Tshisekedi. What is he saying?
Interestingly, I don't know who penned that article to us. It was on the Sunday Times over this weekend, where former President Kabila raised the issues that it seems Tshisekedi wants to be an absolute ruler by silencing opposition and resorting to intimidation. Remember, Thulas, Katumbi and Tshisekedi, and Kabila, they've been on this issue of, Tshisekedi failing to deal with the post-2023 elections, because that's where Colonel Ananga emerges from, and that's where the question of the M23 being supported by Rwanda and the question of how Kabila has handled the Eastern DRC, it comes from the former president noting that they are moving towards imploding, and that's where he used the article that was on our Sunday Times in South Africa to raise those issues to us, which I think are very important from a former president to the current sitting president.
In our own neighborhood in Southern Africa, tell me about the Air Force Chiefs Symposium. You are highlighting that it's focusing on humanitarian crises and not issues of conflict directly.
Yeah, worrying to us that who's drafting that program in Zambia, this Air Force, the African Air Force Chiefs, they've been meeting since 2015. There were 4 of those countries, now there are 29 nations, and they are being supervised by the U.S. Air Forces in Africa. You know, you have Africa Command, but you have USAF Africa also that has been involved to us. Basically, it's on humanitarian issues to us, where you have your El Nino, where you have your issues of floods in Africa. But I think the major issues is around the counter-terrorism that is in the African continent. The issues that they are also looking at, is the question of the Islamic State in Mogadishu in this meeting. But I wonder why Sudan and DRC doesn't dominate this engagement of this air forces, because that's where you need them in the most instances. Yes, they touch on West Africa, this Boko Haram, but I'm a bit concerned to us that you can't just meet in Lusaka when you are sitting with pressing issues in Khartoum as well as in the Eastern DRC.
Lastly then, Sipho, in your historical archives, you take us to that period again when the winds of change were really blowing across South Africa. 25 February 1990, what event of significance happened?
Tulas, you will know that it is when the former late President Mandela addressed a political rally in KwaZulu-Natal, emphasizing on the issues of peace, issues of ending apartheid, but saying that apartheid is not dead. Actually, Tulas, equality and democracy have to be fought for. We need access to political power, and there is a need to engage with vigilantism, thugs and gangs that were operating in KwaZulu-Natal during that time, and emphasizing the role of the ANC in terms of their struggle of bringing all parties towards the Kempton Park talks to us and the Kodesa 1, Kodesa 2. Those are the moments, to us, if you remember, just after the release of Nelson Mandela in 1990, we had to go through many provinces that were affected by political violence, which we know to us there was a third hand or the third force during that time. Asante sana, my brother, as we're still in the conversation, SFM observing the Black History Month.
Thank you for that. That's Sipho Mantula there with your Africa update.
Call Thulasizwe now, 086 000 2032.
So let's hear from Sia in Durban. Good morning to you, Sia. You want to talk to me about the SANDF. What about the SANDF?
Thank you, Thulas. Look, let's call a spade, Thulas. Let's not try to bandage a mess, a wound that has been festering. Our SANDF is suffering, okay? Let us not try to be diplomatic. There is no diplomacy here. Our boys have been ignored, our military, by the politicians, especially the government of the ANC, is responsible for this mess. Our soldiers are sent to such missions and they are being killed. They're like they don't know what they are doing, what they are doing. It's a mockery. It's a mockery of our nation and the SANDF as the pride of the nation. The Lieutenant General, we are behind him, we agree with him, we support him. The statement he made, because when they say, no, he shouldn't have raised this in public, where else can he raise it? Because if it's behind the closed doors, we will never get to know about it. Will they tell us what was discussed? So we have a right as the citizens in this country to know everything that is going on in this country. So we are saying we are behind the military If they have to raise their heads, we will support them because the ANC government, the politicians in particular, have compromised this country's security.
So you're not concerned about this issue being raised by a soldier in the way that Dakota Lekwete was saying that the message absolutely right for him to talk about these issues, but not on that platform as a soldier?
I am not concerned at all. The Lekwete is a politician. Politicians will do what politicians. We are not politicians. We are citizens. We are concerned. We are patriots. We are concerned about the state of our country. Period.
Sia, thank you for that. Let me quickly take a voice note also on the same issue. Someone responding to the conversation we had earlier with the Portfolio Committee Chairperson on Defense and Military Veterans, Dakota Lekwete.
Good morning, Thulasizwe. I'm glad Dakota today managed to tone his voice down because yesterday was against the Defense Force conduct, the Lieutenant General's conduct. And then he must try by all means to make sure that he balances his interview. And I'm glad today he toned his voice down so that he can make sense out of what the Lieutenant General said about. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that. Just an observation on the tone taken by the chairperson, Dakota Lekwete, there from that listener. We'll take more of those a bit later on the show, but for now, let's get a quick update from Rob Byrne.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Northwest first up. Protesting continues in the central Zeros area using the N4, and it's a very busy road between South Africa and Botswana. You'll be prevented from through travel through that Zeros area. Expect some delays, bit of waiting around and diversions. N4 into Pretoria this morning, heavy. You'll come on from Rousseau Street and then you'll sit through Watermeer down to a police incident at the N1 highway. Johan Haynes coming in through Gazina. Really heavy traffic there this morning. Through that Gazina area into town. Coming up from the south, the N1 North, Devlin, through Dipcliffe for a turn down to Uncle Charlie. Stays really busy as well. Durban, a breakdown on the N2 North at Spaghetti Junction. That's why it's so extra heavy coming through from the cement factory side today. Cape Town's N7, jam-packed both ways into Bosmansdam Road. There's some load shedding both on the Boertesak side and on the Montague Garden side, so really heavy, particularly the N7 northbound. It backs from Langa all the way through Goodwood up towards the M1 highway and Bosmansdam Road. And the R304 just south of Atlantis is closed this morning. If you need to get in or out of Atlantis, go the West Coast Road rather than sort of Marmara Road or the N7 exits. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Thulasizwe Simelane on SAFM.
8 minutes to 8. The city of Johannesburg says it has approved a new bylaw aimed at regulating the use of privately owned closed-circuit television CCTV cameras, drones and body cameras. The city says the bylaw is designed to enhance safety and assist in crime prevention and prosecution. The law will ensure that all such surveillance systems are registered with the Johannesburg Metro Police Department and used in a controlled manner. Let's speak to Councillor Sarah Whistler, who is the chairperson of the Public Safety Committee for the city of Joburg, and she is from the Action SA political party. Good morning to you, ma'am, and thank you for your time. So what is the aim and the objective of this new bylaw in relation to the use of this surveillance system, both privately and publicly?
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to explain these things. We've signed an MOU with Vumacam. Mm-hmm. So the issues surrounding the fact that Vumacam has been around for a long time, as you know, but unfortunately the systems with regards to the cameras have not been regulated. There was no bylaw in place. So there was no way that we could make sure that it followed legislation or that the POPIA Act was actually enforced with regards to the data that was collected. The issue surrounding this now has been resolved. It does comply, the regulation that we have put together through the committee does comply with regulation and the POPIA Act. The question that you asked is regarding the residential. The residential ones is so that the JMPD or law enforcement have access to footage that faces public open space. Now, for instance, I'm going to give you a scenario. My cameras at home do face the road. I'm on a corner stand and they do face the road, so I can see the cars coming up and down. The reason for me putting the cameras in the first place is because I was a victim of a very horrific home invasion some years back, and it just gives me that sense of protection. Now, the reason being is we've got Vuma cams all over the place. Now, with the bylaw, we have access to 6,500 of those cameras now, which assists with law enforcement being able to not only pick up vehicles that are in areas that shouldn't, that are the registrations are flagged as either stolen or criminal activity. But they can use the residential cameras to trace back where the criminals actually came from in the first place. So, which assists with crime fighting and efforts from the JMPD. It also assists with fraud. So, people tend to put into the system, into the insurance system, that they've had an accident and they weren't responsible and somebody else was responsible. Now the cameras that you have access to will be able to nullify that, and will save a lot of stuff.
What responsibility does this new bylaw place on people who have CCTV cameras, people who use drones and dash cams and body cameras? What responsibility do they have in relation to registration with the JMPD?
Look, we would just implore everyone to please make sure that you're registered. It's not to control you. It is just so that if there is an incident, they are able to backtrack and see exactly what's going on and where it came from. And it's there to assist with crime fighting efforts throughout the country. As you know, we all most people have experienced some form of crime somewhere. And this is an effort to make sure that is assisted. Obviously, drones, as you know, it's so that we don't have drones going over people's houses and into areas where they're restricted, and so that regulates those.
What about those cameras that are not facing public areas? So a camera in a home not facing the street. Is there a responsibility for someone to register that? No.
No, not at all. Not at all. If you've got cameras that are facing inside, like I have as well, I have them in the garden. Those ones are not, you don't need to send any information with regards to those.
Lastly, talk to me about issues of releasing footage from CCTV cameras, right? From time to time, you see this footage making the rounds on social media where there's been an incident. What will be the implications of this bylaw on that kind of practice?
Well, the thing is that's the reason why this bylaw is so important, right? Because at the moment, everybody in sundry has access to anything they want, and the information that's get put out there could possibly harm somebody else, especially if it was the information is incorrect. So, with regards to that, the only people that will have access to that data is law enforcement. So currently, as it stands with the City of Johannesburg's previous system with the IOC, where we've got cameras all over the city, especially in the inner city, the only way that footage could be retrieved is if the police came through to the IOC with a docket number, and then they were sent to a secure room with an officer where they would be able to view the footage. And similarly, this is exactly the same case.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time this morning. That's Sarah Whistler, Councillor Sarah Whistler, who is the chairperson of the Public Safety Committee in the city of Joburg.
Call Thulasizwe now, 086 000 2032.
Let me speak to Moses in Bramley. Good morning to you, Moses. You want to talk to me about the SANDF this morning?
Yeah, good morning to Thulasizwe. Yeah, the general is saying what us, the citizens of this country, we are concerned about. It's just echoing what we are feeling at this moment. Because it started with this arms deal. When these guys are beginning to eat using our defense as a mechanism of eating, this is where we actually go wrong during the arms deal. And with these guys, when they are just defending or talking in who are not even having our concern in their hearts. They wanted to perpetuate the eating. And the general was right, because during apartheid, when we wanted to mobilize, people mobilized at funerals. People give up dates at funerals. Do you still remember when it's unfashionable to challenge Zuma? Sipho Pichana at one of in Eastern Cape, one of our the comrade in Eastern Cape funeral.
Yes.
He vented out against what Zuma was doing at funeral. I think it's a platform where we should use it,
Moses,
because we've been,
thank you for that. That's Moses out in Bramley. I want to take another voice note on this issue. In fact, specifically on the comments that were made about the funding of the SANDF, rendering it a Mickey Mouse force.
Morning, Thulas. We must stop calling a thing a thing. It must have a name, must give it a name. Ask the president, even Maluleka, the statistician, how many people are in South Africa? When you talk about safety, how many people are in South Africa? Those soldiers are not politicians, those ones who died. But they were sent there by unscrupulous politicians to go and die there. Then you say somebody's being political. What's being political about calling a spade there?
All right.
Not
Thank you.
From Brixton.
Thank you for that. We'll make time and take a few more of your calls and comments on that issue and any other issue that's exercising your mind this morning. But for now, let's go over to Ann Musa, who's got the latest news update.
Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 30760. Now that's good news.
In our top stories, Motsoaledi criticized for remarks on private health care and Hlophe's JSC case back at the Western Cape High Court. Good morning. The South African Medical Association Trade Union, SAMATU, has criticized the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, for attributing the high cost of private health care to a lack of regulation. In a media briefing yesterday, Motsoaledi delivered the Health Market Inquiry report. It revealed widespread deterioration of benefits as well as expensive and rising costs of healthcare and medical scheme cover. He claimed this was a result of a lack of regulation of the healthcare industry. SAMATU's General Secretary is Dr. Cedric Sihlangu.
What we find a bit unfortunate is that the minister, being the Minister of Health, is vested with the authority to be the one that is responsible for healthcare in the country, both private and public healthcare. So there's no Minister of Public Health. So you can't have a convenient argument where you come back later and say, well, there are no regulations. So the question is, who is responsible for putting in place regulations? A simple answer is in the National Health Act. It's the Department of Health, it's the Minister of Health. So these regulations ought to have been in place all these years to prevent the escalating costs, and that was never done.
Police are still searching for more than 13 suspects who were involved in a cash-in-transit heist in Lodium, west of Pretoria, yesterday. 6 other suspects were killed during the shootout. Police believe the suspects might be linked to a number of other robberies. Gauteng Deputy Provincial Commissioner Major General Fred Kekana.
Those that are dead, we are going to take their fingerprints. Through fingerprints, we can link them with any other criminal activity where they are wanted or they were involved. Or, secondly, we'll also take their fingerprints will assist us to identify, to get their identity. And through their identity, we are going to continue to do more further profile of them. And out of that, more linkages will come out of that profiling.
The matter dealing with impeached Judge John Hlophe being barred from sitting on the Judicial Service Commission, the JSC, will be back in the Western Cape High Court today. The DA, Freedom Under Law and Corruption Watch are seeking a final order on the matter. Last year, the court granted an interim order barring Hlophe from sitting on the JSC, the body responsible for interviewing candidates of judicial positions. Before being impeached, Hlophe, who is now a member of parliament, was the judge president of the court. Chris Oxtoby of Freedom Under Law says it's unreasonable for Dr. Hlophe to sit on the very body that recommended he be impeached.
This week's litigation is the second part of a court challenge that began last year. Freedom Under Law, the Democratic Alliance and Corruption Watch all brought legal challenges to the National Assembly's decision to designate Dr. John Hlophe as a member of the Judicial Service Commission. The reason for that challenge essentially is that Dr. Hlophe had been impeached as a judge for gross misconduct when he was found to have made an attempt to influence Constitutional Court judges in an earlier case involving former President Jacob Zuma. Broadly, the argument in this litigation.
Opposition parties have mixed reactions to the Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi's State of the Province address. Some say it has nothing new, while others have described it as content of empty promises. The EFF's Nkululeko Kundunga says the speech lacks a plan of action.
What we are extremely aggrieved by is that in as much as he speaks of the challenges, does not speak of an in-depth program of action. It would have been difficult, obviously, with the Division of Revenue Bill not having been passed through Parliament for him to really and genuinely allocate even certain funding models that will approve some of these budgets that he speaks of. I mean, you look at, for example, in terms of the infrastructure of schooling, we have over 5,500 classes in shortage, and 18 schools will not assist in creating and ensuring that there's a backlog that is sustained and is corrected.
And finally, Washington's changing stance on the war between Russia and Ukraine has been highlighted at the United Nations. This after the U.S. envoy to the UN repeatedly voted alongside Russia. To mark the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Security Council has adopted a resolution calling for an end to the war. It contains no criticism of Moscow's aggression. Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Mariana Betsa has warned the Council against appeasing Russia.
This is existential war for the entire democratic world, for our democratic principles and values. And Russia has repeatedly tried to dismantle this rules-based order and our security architecture. It is impossible to stop the aggressor by appeasing. Russia must implement the demands by the international community and withdraw its troops from the territory of Ukraine.
Recapping the top story, the South African Medical Association Trade Union has criticized the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, for attributing the high cost of private health care to a lack of regulation. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 30754 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out.
February may be a short month, but with Outsurance, your car insurance savings could be big. Get a quote, and if Outsurance can't beat your car insurance premium, ask them for 500 Rand cash. And make that 1,500 Rand cash if you've been claim-free and with the same insurer for 3 years. Get monthly savings on your car insurance or cash in your pocket. Either way, you win. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Here's a real heavy backlog this morning around the country. The N4 coming into Pretoria, very, very heavy. You'll join from Rousseau Street, and then you'll hit a queue down through Watermeer, all the way down to the N1, the highway. Steve Biko, Jan Haynes through Gazina towards Pretoria CBD. That's very heavy this morning. And lots of traffic up Joburg's Mike 1 from Boysons to Parktown, and then Houghton through towards the Greyston Drive exit. Over in Durban, a cement truck is overturned on the M4 between Sabaya and Mhlanga. Now, that's going to take a while to clear. There's some very heavy traffic. If you're on your way to or from the airport, I would suggest you use the N2 between the airport and Gateway, where you can hook back into the M4. Just avoid that M4 between Mhlanga and Sabaya. Long queues, and probably will be queuing there for some time. Cape Town, Tableview wrapping up some load shedding. It stays busy on routes like Marine Drive towards Dolphin Beach, Bloberg Road, and the Coburg Road out past the refinery stay very heavy. And the N7's had a bit of a nightmare this morning. Very heavy both ways down to Bosmansdam, south from the Plattercliff Road, northbound backlogging from Epping. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. It's cricket. We're building up to the Proteas, who will be taking on Australia today at around 11 a.m. in this all-important Champions Trophy clash. And in rugby, the Blitzbok coach Philip Snyman says their plans for this year's HSBC Sevens still on track. Let's find out more at around 8:30.
The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. The Morning Brief with Thulasizwe Simelane. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
9 minutes after 8 on this Tuesday. Hey folks, good morning. We're into the third hour of the Tuesday edition of the Morning Brief. I'm Thulasizwe Simelane. So the conversation flowing in multiple streams, but I do see and I get the sense that the comments of this Lieutenant General in the SANDF, Lieutenant General Nchabeni Mapaha, have resonated with you, as well as the response that we did take a bit earlier on from Dakota Lekhwete, who is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans. I would want to hear more from you on that, but also we've been talking and I've been asking you about whether or not you understand how the healthcare you receive, especially if you are a member of a medical scheme, do you understand how the pricing is arrived at? And are you happy with the transparency as to how, why are you charged as much as you are being charged at the point of service provision? Because there's this new proposal that has been put forward by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition regulations that would allow for the healthcare providers and medical schemes to be exempted from certain provisions of competition law so that they can jointly and together set tariffs in a move that the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Parkstar, who hopes will help to bring down the costs of healthcare provision. Those are some of of the topics that are on my mind and resonating with me this morning. But of course, I'm at your disposal and I'm guided by you. The number to dial for that is 086 000 2032, and your WhatsApp voice notes, please send them to 061 410 4107. This is SAFM. We are leading the conversations that move us. The third hour of the Tuesday edition of the Morning Brief starts now.
Outsurance has another random fact for you. In 1999, a litre of petrol cost just under 3 Rand. Now it's about 21 Rand. It's scary how prices keep going up. In times like these, it's encouraging to know that Outsurance has got your back and is committed to saving you money on your car insurance. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. Danica knows all about saving on her 2018 Haval H2.
I saved 455 Rand. It was quick and easy.
Here's Lebu with her sweet 644 Rand saving on her 2019 Mazda CX-3.
Gave me the best quote ever. My savings is 644 Rand. Come join our insurance and save some money.
You heard it here first. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
Call Thulasizwe now. 086 000 2032.
All right, let me take a call from Arthur in Pongolo. Pongolo. Good morning to you, Arthur. You want to talk to me about the SANDF this morning?
Yes, good morning to SAFM listeners. Travis, I really don't know what is happening with our government. If they think our soldiers didn't learn one or two things to Burkina Faso current government, how they take the government, soldiers take the government to Burkina Faso, they will be suffering under ignorantism. Soldiers in South Africa have come to a part where they had to say it's enough. What the soldiers spoke, it's a recipe for a coup d'etat. If we will be fooling ourselves and say we did not see it coming, we'll be ignorant to ourselves. This was a result of the government who have never paid dues to the soldiers. Now, it will be the first government to be taken by the soldiers. And I agree with the soldiers, because if you look at in terms of a recipe for ignorance, if you allow foreigner people illegally to be so much employed by our government. And then you take your soldiers and be killed in our foreigner government and foreigner countries. What do you say your soldiers must do? We have got no defense. Soldiers have to take down the country.
Sure.
How they can protect us if they don't protect the government?
Gotcha.
This government has got no tool.
Arthur, thank you for that. I like your balanced approach, just also highlighting that the issues that are being raised are actually valid issues, but also at the same time advancing your arguments about your concern about a soldier being the one that articulates these matters in this way. Freddie in Kimberley, good morning, also on the SANDF.
Good morning, Thulas. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Thulas, now something is bothering me with the South African National Defence Force, Thulas. You see, Thulas, you remember there was a fire in the Watla. Our soldiers could not even fight that fire, Thulas. There was a time where our soldiers did not even have rations. It was supported by what is the gift of the givers.
Sure.
I don't know if you still remember that.
I don't remember that episode.
Yeah, there was something like that. You understand? Now, the general, I'm supporting this general, not Thulas, because the South African Defence Force is not the South African Defence Force. I'm not saying they must be like the puppets of South African Defence Force where they go about in the streets and do whatever they did in the past. You understand, Thulas? There is no discipline in the army. If you look at the soldier walking around the street, you look at that soldier, you can see that man, there's no discipline in that man. You understand? Thulas, our borders are porous. People are coming in and out. Where is the soldiers who are supposed to guard our borders? Thulas. So we don't have a defense force. The equipment that's supposed to be serviced is not serviced anymore. What if you are attacked now today as we are talking to each other now? What is going to happen? Who's going to protect us? Do we really have an army?
Yeah. Gotcha. Freddie, let me play a devil's advocate with you just for a second.
Yes.
So today you agree with what this general is saying.
Yes.
And everyone, it resonates with a lot of people. Tomorrow, the general is emboldened and someone else in the military leadership is emboldened and takes a leaf from what the general did and is addressing an issue that he or she believes would resonate and perhaps stands up and says, actually, it's not just the underfunding by the politicians of the SANDF that's a problem. I don't like how they are spending money on, grants, and then it escalates from there. I don't think that this Paul Mashatile person should be deputy president, etc., etc. Are you not worried about a slippery slope? That today it may be a topic and a position with which we agree. In future, it may be a problematic one.
I understand, Thulas, but fact of the matter is, I understand everything that you're saying, and I'm agreeing with you. But fact of the matter is here, the army is no more the enemy that we can depend on, Thulas. Whatever is going to happen in the past, okay, then we will deal with that. But now we have the issue at hand. And the issue at hand now is the army is no more conducive. The army is no more able to protect us, the citizens of this country. Thulas, you heard about what's happening to our soldiers. They're being kept hostage.
Gotta move on.
They send some army to go and extract our soldiers, but they cannot go in. What kind of army is this?
Gotcha. Freddie and Kimberley there. Let me take a call from Debucho in the Northwest. Debucho, good morning. Also on the issue of the SANDF.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to you.
Very well. How are you?
I'm good. Look, man, the reality must be set straight. The status of Defence Force, it's bad. It's bad. I tell you, the members of SNDF are also experiencing lack of uniform. They don't have uniform. Some of them, they have to buy boots. The status of SNDF is at a dire state at the moment. We need to face reality. That general must be protected at all costs.
Sure.
The aspersion that he has stated, where was the military command council? This was the real platform for the general to allude on what he has said.
All right. So you have no problems with that platform being used as opposed to the military command council, for example?
No. Okay. He has already indicated that he's being protected by his senior for those aspersions that he has made.
Gotcha.
And South Africa is a constitutional democracy. There is no way that general will call for coup d'etat. There is no way. South Africa is a constitutional democracy,
Okay.
and most of the coup d'etat, mostly they happen on the west part of the African continent. And South Africa is the biggest economic and military role player in the continent,
All right,
and also
gotcha.
in the region. So we need to protect our house. We need to protect the house. We need to empower the military
Gotcha.
because we are the biggest role player
Thank
in South
you.
Africa.
That's Debucho in the Northwest. Semi in Cape Town, good morning. You want to talk to me about the DRC?
Yes, morning to us and morning to the listeners. Firstly, I want to start, I think, what is the name? Africa.
Sipho Mantula.
Super Mantula, yes.
Yes.
He commented something about Prime Minister Judith Suminwa in Geneva, where the ministers of international affairs
Yes.
are meeting. So, Prime Minister of Congo mentioned that there is about 7,000 people dead, killed by the M23 terrorists just within a month. But what is shocking that President Kabila, former president of the DRC, he mentioned nothing. I went through the piece that he wrote on the Sunday newspaper. Sunday. What is it called? The report he made on the news that he condemning the Congolese government for their approach towards the war, but he mentioned nothing about the people that has been killed. Okay, and also the other thing is Corneille Nangaa, as Sipho Mantula mentioned that he emerged from the disagreement from 2023 election. That is not true, because Corneille Nangaa was actually the CEO of the
Electoral
Congolese
Commission.
version,
Yeah.
yes, of the Congolese version of the IEC. So, and during that time, he is the one who pronounced that Felix Tshisekedi, the current president,
Yeah.
won the election.
Yeah.
So, there is no balance between what these people are fighting for. If you can remember,
Gotcha.
President Tshisekedi mentioned something that Kabila is RFC, which is led currently by
Right.
Corneille Nangaa and is affiliated with M23 terrorist group.
All right.
So
Semi,
that
gotcha.
is what angered Kabila, and he did not mention anything condemning Rwandan aggression towards
All right.
the Congolese people.
Semi, I've got to move on. Thank you for that input this morning. That's Semi in Cape Town. Thank you for your inputs. We will engage with you a bit later on the show.
Meet TJ, the magician. Well, he isn't quite the magician, but shame, let's call him that. The other day he tried to do that coin ear trick. Poor Owami is still in the hospital with a 5 rand coin stuck in his ear. He tried getting his pit bull, Mufasa, to levitate. Oh, he got that right. But now Mufasa is levitating through Tembisa, and somehow TJ forgot to read the section on how to get Mufasa back down. It's tough being a magician, but luckily for TJ, Britain's Got Talent Ultimate Magician will be the perfect inspiration for him to be the best magician in Tembisa. Catch Britain's Got Talent Ultimate Magician Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
Thulasizwe Simelane on the Morning Brief. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
22 minutes after 8, the Competition Commission has proposed a new regulatory framework requiring tech giants like Google, Facebook, and other digital platforms to compensate local news media companies for using their news content. If no agreement is reached between stakeholders, the Commission may impose a 5 to 10% tax on digital platforms to address the imbalance that has negatively impacted South African media outlets. Let's speak to Noluthando Jogazi, who is the technical lead and case manager for the Media and Digital Platforms Market Inquiry at the Competition Commission of South Africa. Good morning to you, and thank you for your time. What is broken in the current model of how these tech giants deal with news content generated by local news agencies and companies?
Good morning, Thulasizwe. Thank you for having me, and good morning to your listeners. Firstly, I think as a starting point, I urge the listeners to go to our website and go have a look at this report. It's quite an extensive report, and it details a lot of findings on what we think is broken in the system in terms of, how media and platforms engage with the media and in terms of, advertising revenue. But we've had a lot of findings that the chairperson and the commissioner fleshed out yesterday in terms of how we see the impact of news on platforms and digital platforms. At a high level, I think mainly, we've seen findings in terms of search, and we've created remedies around search and social media. But more than anything, we tried to create behavioral changes in terms of how referral traffic is sent to news websites, and how news websites can monetize this referral traffic from social media as well as search. And so we've created remedies that will try to circumvent some of these broken issues that we find in social media as well as YouTube and search. But also, we've seen a lot of issues coming out of the negotiations that have happened with media themselves and the Google platforms, and we've tried to come up with a win-win solution in creating a different approach.
What of the argument, Norutando, and I imagine that you went down that pathway of argument that says actually what is at play is these platforms such as Meta, Facebook, Meta, Google, and the likes. What is actually happening is almost like a partnership. The news media in South Africa generate the content, and it gets amplified and has wider reach. Did you go down that pathway, and did you find it to be plausible and sustainable? That is the argument. That's what is at play at the moment.
Yes, of course. And so, we've created remedies around how we see the value of news and what we think the value of news for digital platforms is. In the public hearings last year, the platforms themselves did agree with us that there is value in news being on the platforms, and we've conducted many surveys as well. Last year we conducted a survey in which shows that a lot of South African consumers find news on social media, and they go to social media for news and search news on Google's platforms as well. So we see this correlation, and we flesh out this value that news plays on digital platforms in the report itself.
And in fact, you were able to quantify, for instance, in the case of Google, just how much traffic, what's the value of the traffic that it drives to news sites versus what it then generates on its own.
Yes, that's correct. Google says that in the previous in the public hearings last year, Google had said that news queries generate about 35 million in ad revenue. But what we've estimated is looking at a bigger picture. The overall value that Google gains from being an authoritative source for news is around 10 to 15%, and we say this in the report itself. Search queries are news related. 10 to 15% of these search queries, and it helps establish Google as a trusted platform, encouraging users to stick with it even for commercial searches that are specialized even for travel or shopping. And so with this 10 to 15%, we've able to quantify how much Google can gain from the value of news on its platforms. We've even gone into the details of the methodology we've used, and so we invite the general public and your listeners to go and look at how we've quantified this figure and how we've come to this methodological approach.
So tell me about one of the remedies that you are proposing. It has to do with payment of compensation by these tech giants, including, if I read correctly, some 300 to 500 million rand over 3 to 5 years for lost revenue. Just tell me a bit more about that. Is that one of your core remedies that you are suggesting?
Sure. So it's not a core remedy, but it is one of the remedies. I think we've tried to incorporate both compensation as well as behavioral changes. We've tried to compensate changes in how traffic is referred to news media, but also we've tried to create this pool where we see the compensation that news has lost over the years. And in terms of coming up with this 300 to 500 million, as I said, we try to quantify this value through this 10 to 15% that we've seen in how consumers then go onto platforms or Google itself to get news. And I need to emphasize here that these are provisional findings and remedies. And so the benefit of getting these provisional findings out and published is that we get to engage with the industry itself and to flesh out some of these proposed with the global platforms. And so, we are sorry, I think you were trying to say something?
No, I was going to say, but just the backdrop and background to it all, Noluthando, if you can share that with us. Is it that the news media in South Africa is bleeding in as far as revenue is concerned for many factors, but certainly from where you sit as a commission, from the work you've done, one of those factors is this aspect of revenue not being shared fairly with these global tech giants?
Yes, of course. Yes, that's completely true. And we've tried to then compensate this loss in value through this 300 to 500 million annually for a period of 3 to 5 years. We also think that, it does benefit. I mean, we've seen that the AIP and Google have come together with these negotiations outside of the commission, and we see it playing out as well globally in terms of how Google and the rest of the platforms have negotiated some of this compensation with other global media houses. And so this is played out globally with Google and digital platforms.
All right.
And so
all right. I think we're losing you there, but thank you for your time this morning. That's Noluthando Jogazi, who is the technical lead and case manager for the Media and Digital Platforms Market Inquiry at the Competition Commission of South Africa. 8:30 now, and Musa on standby with your latest news headlines.
Good morning. Thanks to us. In the headlines, alleged underworld figure Nafis Modaka is expected to continue his testimony in the Western Cape High Court this morning. Modaka and 14 co-accused are facing over 100 charges. The South African Medical Association Trade Union has criticized the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, for attributing the high cost of private health care to a lack of regulation. And teams have continued to battle several fires in the Witzenberg area in the Western Cape. The fires started more than a week ago. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Very busy around the Sandton area of Joburg. Sandton and Morningside, Bryanston area, routes like Ballyclare and Bryanston Drive, Ravonia Road, William Mandela, Greyston, Catherine, South, all very, very slow. It's got the sort of feel about some load shedding around that area. Not sure if it is, but some just very slow going traffic. Mike 1 from Ormonde up towards Parktown stays pretty busy for this time of morning. And there's a broken down vehicle on the M1 at Ravonia, so queues coming through from the Randburg side. N14 is under a bit of pressure today. The Krugersdorp Highway on that section between the R55 and the M1 Brockfontein interchange. And Johan Haynes has some traffic light faults and some load shedding. So coming off Steve Biko through Gazina, absolutely jam-packed into the city centre. Use Paul Kruger from the north. It'll get you through quicker. Here's a bit of alternative route advice as well. Durban, a cement truck overturning between Sabaya and the Mhlanga area on the M4, the Ruthfirst Highway. Very heavy both ways. Probably will be for a while. Use the N2 between King Sharka and Gateway as your alternative. N2 North still heavy between Cement Factory and the broken down vehicle. Has been there forever this morning at Spaghetti Junction. Just north of Cape Town, the R304 closed. That's the Mumra Road, closed in and out of Atlantis. Use the R307 and the West Coast Road. Go in and out of Atlantis that way today. And the N7 North stays heavy, lining up from Fort Trekker Road at Goodwood right through to Bosmansdam Road. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Good morning to you once again, Zai. So the Proteas are riding the tide, having been able to dispense with Afghanistan, but now lies the challenge of the Aussies.
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's all gonna go down for the Aussies.
For the Aussies.
Because you know what? We've got Themba Bavuma. We're gonna bring that Vuma.
I like that.
Yeah, so let's look at this clash. It starts 11 a.m., weather permitting, of course, and it's a crucial Champions Trophy clash. The Proteas taking on Australia. South Africa, they thrashed Afghanistan in their first match. They've got history on their side, and they've also got Captain Themba Bavuma. And could they Vuma their way to victory? Let's hear from our captain.
Yeah, we're quite bullish about our chances. Yeah, as much as the tri-series, we didn't have all our guys. It still was an opportunity for us to get whatever intel that we can on the conditions, share that information with all the other guys who came in. Fortunately, the guys who came in, they've come in on the back of some good cricket back home. So confidence is good. But yeah, we're quite optimistic about our chances and how far we can go in this competition.
Now, rugby Blitzbok coach Philip Snyman says their plans for this year's HSBC Sevens are still in place despite placing second in Vancouver. They fell short of winning the Vancouver title, losing 19-12 to Argentina in the final.
There might be one or two players that we rotate, or one or two technical changes that we will make, but I think we will adjust that, and we will make plans as soon as we get back home, and then also adjust one or two minor things when it comes to our game plan. The great thing is, like I said, the attitude and effort, we can't fault the guys on that, so now it's easy to rectify the mistakes. So we'll go back and work hard and make sure we come back stronger, and I know the hunger is there to win tournaments. So.
On to boxing, and the former IBF junior featherweight world champion Vuyani the Beast Bungu says he feels appreciated and respected for the first time since he retired in the early 2000s following recognition from Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture Gayton McKenzie. Bungu is participating in the boxing convention discussion and sat in one of the commissions, saying he's positive about the direction of the resolutions.
It gives us, a say we must be ready. We must be ready because things are going to change. We must be, we must clean our houses because things are going to change. We've been crying a lot, but today, at the end, we are smiling. That's how I feel, as I'm speaking with you.
And South African wheelchair tennis star Donald Rampardi has confirmed that his build-up to the French Open will begin with the upcoming Asia Tour in April. Rampardi is fresh from competing in the 2025 Australian Open, where he finished in the quarterfinals after being beaten by Guy Sasson of Greece. He says he's happy with his performance.
Australia Open. It's always a tough one to play there, because all the top 10s are there and all that. So it was a good one, even though I was defending, because last year I managed to get to the semifinals. So this year around it was quarterfinals. But all in all, I am happy with the performance that I gave out there.
And finally, Casper Ruud eased into the second round of the Acapulco Open with a 6-4, 6-3 victory against Arthur Rindeneck. That's a wrap of your morning brief sport. There'll be more around 12:30 with John Heidegger. I'm Zai Khan.
The Business Update on SAFM.
Good morning to you once again in Dowling. So it's one of those many meetings that will take place over the course of the year while South Africa is president of the G20. Tell me about the B20 meeting that is underway in Cape Town.
That's right, Tula. So those meetings got started yesterday in Cape Town, marking the start of a year-long global business engagement. This event is particularly significant coming on the heels of the G20 foreign ministers meeting last week. Now, despite tensions between the U.S. and South Africa, which led to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent skipping the meetings, Business Leadership SA sees the summit as an opportunity for South Africa to engage with the world, build relationships, and project its interests globally. Through 8 task forces, the B20 will develop policy recommendations focusing on key areas such as trade and investment, investment, sustainable food systems, and digital transformation. These recommendations will be presented to the G20 later this year, providing a platform for businesses to shape global economic policy discussions. Now, according to Busi Mavuso, CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, hosting the B20 and G20 meetings or summits brings numerous benefits to South Africa, including attracting foreign investment, boosting tourism, enhancing international reputation, and influencing global policy discussions. Mavuso further added that the B20 meetings is an important event that can help South Africa promote its interest on the global stage and drive economic growth.
Darlene, tell me about Process acquiring the European food delivery firm Just Eat. What's that about?
So they've acquired that business for about 79 billion rands, and this acquisition marks Process's largest investment to date. Now, back in 2020, the company had initially failed to acquire Just Eat, losing out to Takeaway.com in an $8 billion deal, but Process has now acquired the combined entity at a lower price. Just Eat operates in 17 international markets, connecting 61 million customers with over 356,000 local partners, and Process plans to leverage its investment expertise and proven strategies to boost growth and strengthen its presence in the European food delivery market using that business. Now, the acquisition will be funded through Process's existing cash resources. The deal is subject to regulatory clearances and approval from the Netherlands Authority for the Financial Markets. Now, analysts believe that Process will apply its successful iFood playbook to transform Just Eat, focusing on technological improvements, product features, and service quality to drive growth, as that business has not been performing well post-COVID. Despite some investors' skepticism, Process is confident in the strategic value of the acquisition and its potential for operational improvements. Local markets, however, don't seem to have liked the transaction at all, with both Naspers and Process closing over 7% in the red in yesterday's trading session.
All right, before you tell us about our market update, Ntauling, I'm a bit distracted. I'm listening to you, I promise. I am listening, but I'm a bit distracted. You and I like to joke about companies whose stock we would love to hold because we believe there's so much value, you and I would make so much money. I'm just distracted by, there's this report about the JSE talking about an estimated 4.5 billion rand in unclaimed dividends that they say are currently held by listed companies. I can throw this to you because you know you are Ntauling Lichela. That's massive, hey?
It really is, and they even partnered up with, I think,
Lucas Radebe.
To try and get the word out to for people to actually claim these dividends. What we're also seeing is that a lot of private companies get some employees to invest in these BEE shares. But, you know, when you change jobs and you leave a company, sometimes you don't go and claim those dividends. So that's what's currently happening.
Hey. Meanwhile, you and I are just on standby. The campaign is called Claim It. I think you and I would be the champions for it. All right, quickly give us a sense then of what kind of a day we can expect on this Tuesday on the markets.
So local markets are likely to start the day in the red, extending yesterday's losses. In terms of company earnings, news is quite thin today, so trade likely to be influenced by global markets. Meanwhile, a softer dollar has worked in the rand's benefit, with the rand remaining stable at 18.36 to the dollar this hour. Then looking at US futures, they're pretty upbeat despite yesterday's negative close. Focus now shifts to Nvidia's earnings being released tomorrow. Then over in Asia, stocks trending in the red and likely to end in negative territory today as Trump confirmed that he will slap Canada and Mexico with those tariffs that were delayed earlier this month.
All right, thank you for that. That's Ntauling Lichela there. She's kept you updated on the economy, business, and the markets over the last 2.5 hours here on The Morning Brief.
Call Thulasizwe now, 086 000 2032.
So a lot of you reacting to the comments that were made about the state of the SANDF made by that senior officer in the SANDF. Let's take a few of those comments now.
Hi, Tulas. My cousin is in the army. He has never been without a uniform, and he has never been without boots, and he has never been in a position where he has to buy himself boots. So I don't know. I mean, I think today or yesterday, everybody's is got an army personnel in their homes, and they know so much about the army. Soldiers are there to serve, and if you talk to them, they will tell you that they will die for their country. It's passion, and everyone else really. People who want coup d'etats, I think they must visit those countries who are unstable and see if they will like it. Thanks. It's Bongi here.
Thanks, Bongi. Thank you for that. So as far as the claims about uniforms and rations running out, I do believe that it warrants that in the coming days, we get Spiwe Dlamini or someone to come and clarify some of those issues. I take note of what you are pointing out about the resourcing. Generally, resourcing is an issue, of course, in as far as the military is concerned, but the extent to which it has gone, the claims around them not having enough uniforms and rations at times, I do believe that we may want to get someone to come and account and answer whether or not that has actually happened.
Hey, Thulas, good morning. Hey, I won't even mention my name. Thulas, that Dakota guy is not telling the truth. The general is 100% correct. Why must we hide the truth whereas our soldiers are dying? Whereas our soldiers are not protected, whereas the ministry that is in the defense force has got nothing. She knows nothing about defense. So now this guy is coming in and say, hey, they should respect their leaders. We don't have leaders in South Africa. This is Klanke. Good morning, Thulas.
Thank you. Good morning to you as well. Let me take one or two calls. Let me speak to Force in the Northwest. Good morning to you, Force. You want to talk politics?
Yeah, good morning.
What about politics? Yeah. Force, I can hear you. Please go ahead. Force? Oi. All right, we seem to be battling with Force's line there. Let's see if we can get Force back. We battled a little bit there to get him on a clear line. Lynn, good morning from Kimberley. You want to talk to me about service delivery in your neck of the woods.
Hi, good morning, Tula. Yes, I heard you interviewing the municipal manager earlier regarding the water and the huge amount that they are supposed to be going to use to fix Riverton pump station. If they would start fixing all the leaks, I have reported some leaks for over 2 years down our road. They don't even acknowledge that you've reported the leaks. I have tried to get a faulty meter, a water meter, sorted out because it's not showing anything. That's also nearly 2 years. Nothing has been done about it. And don't even want to talk about trying to get a prepaid meter sorted out in Kimberley. There is no service delivery, and they talk and talk and talk, and all they do is spend our money on nonsense. Potholes everywhere, and Kimberley is really a filthy, filthy, disgusting place. It's become an S-hole. Terrible. It's too terrible what this place looks like, and I've lived here for 65 years. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, that's disheartening, Lynn. That really is distressing and disheartening, and I suppose many people would echo your sentiments in their own areas, how service delivery failures are manifesting. Perhaps in the coming days and in the coming weeks, we could seek to have some accountability coming through from the leadership in local government in that area, but as well as the provincial government as well. Kaifas in Joburg, good morning to you. You want to talk to me about CCTVs and what the city of Joburg is proposing?
Yes. Thank you, Thulasizwe. I find that interesting, actually. I have a story. I live in Johannesburg in a residential estate, and my neighbor has got CCTV cameras that face in the public road. And one day I checked on Facebook, she had posted something, she had a concern about a car passing through. But then I saw that in the same pictures, my property was there and my garage. And then I wondered whether there must be some regulation around that area. And Johannesburg, the city of Joburg is looking at that, but I think they need to extend to it to say, you cannot post that, or rather, if any camera is actually facing the public area, there must be some regulation on can that happen? Can it face your neighbor's property? And
Yeah.
can you post it on social media?
Yeah.
In these days on TikTok, you find yourself being posted without your permission. So I found that interesting, maybe something to look at, to say any camera that's actually facing a public area, there must be a regulation, whether it's in a property or not. I think the lady from HNSA actually said she has one that is facing the public area. And what does she do with the footage?
Yes.
Does she share it? I found that a concern to the
You see, Kefas, you are the right target for what the city of Joburg is asking for in terms of public participation. So I'd encourage you to head on over and actually partake in the public hearings and public inputs around this bylaw, because it addresses exactly that, issues around privacy, protection of personal information act concerns, and especially with those cameras that are public facing. So you would be perfect for that public participation. Gift in the Eastern Cape, good morning to you. You want to talk to me about the SANDF general who's been speaking out?
Yes, no, of course. Look, first and foremost, I think South Africans must understand one thing, that our democracy must not be abused. Look, I'm raising this because, exposing military secrets is tantamount to endangering the safety and security of our forces, first and foremost. And secondly, I think such actions of that general compromise strategic operations, and they also weaken national defense and place countless lives at risk. Because to me, as a general, someone entrusted with the highest responsibility of safeguarding both soldiers and citizens, they should understand better than anyone the gravity of protecting classified information. That's the second point. Thirdly, leadership in the military is not just about commanding troops. It's about embodying integrity, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to national security. And to me, any breach of that trust not only damages the institution, but endangers the very people sworn to protect the country, because that general took an oath.
Yeah.
So people must not support anarchy in our country, because it seems as if people are abusing the democracy that we have. If it was in another country, that general should have been charged by now. Please, South Africans must understand this. This is our country that we fought for. And some of us went to prison at a very tender age, that generals who are entrusted to safeguard the interests of this country, the national security of this country, want to endanger the safety of.
But you're not
citizens of this
suggesting,
country.
are you, Gift? You're not suggesting that there was anything classified or secrets of the state about what he said. It was mostly an observation that is not new and unique to him. It's actually been made by others.
Look, irrespective of the observation, that man is a general, is in the army, is not supposed to say anything related to the security of this country publicly. Worst part, in a funeral, no, South Africans,
Gotcha.
come on.
All right, Gift in the Eastern Cape there. Thank you for that. We'll come back to your calls and WhatsApp voice notes in a short while. But for now, let's check in with Rob Byrne with the latest traffic update.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Couple of issues in the northwest just to bring you up to speed with. Zeros, the protesting continues there. Blockages along the N4. That was pretty intense yesterday. It looks pretty intense again this morning. I expect some delays and possible diversions. The 511, the Brits-Tabazimbi Road, remains closed between the Northwest Limpopo provincial border and Beesterkraal. You can use the 510 or the 516, the Bila Road, as alternatives until that 511 has been fully reopened to traffic flow. Joburg side, we've got some busy traffic on the N1 North this morning. Between Randburg and Sunninghill, also just very slow getting into Sandton. All your approach routes like South Road, Bryanston Drive, Grayston Drive, Catherine, Winnie Mandela, Sandton, all very slow getting into that central Sandton area. Crash on the N3 North at Marlborough Drive, backlogging traffic coming up from the Edenvale side. Durban, the overturned cement truck can take a while to sort this out, I would think. It's on the M4, the Ruthurst Highway, between Sabaya and Umhlanga, so it's heavy backlogs both ways, and probably will be. Use the N2 between Umhloti and Gateway as your alternative route around that. Stationary vehicles still with us. N2 North at Spaghetti Junction. It's heavy coming from the M7. Breakdown at Key Ridge on your way to Pietermaritzburg as well. And driving into Cape Town, it's just been a prang on Nelson Mandela Boulevard inbound at Searle Street. That's keeping traffic pretty heavy through Hospital Bend. The N2 inbound from Robert Sobukwe. The M3 inbound from Wynberg Hill. Both of those routes heavy into the Bend, then down Nelson Mandela Boulevard to that crash. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Day 15. Location undisclosed. Mood brave. Music Eye of the Tiger. Dear Diary, it's been 2 weeks of epic challenges against some of the most memorable and epic Survivor contestants. I have endured some harsh weather conditions, unbelievable drama, and these fire tokens have given me and the other contestants a second chance to stay in the game. Food. I feast on the defeat of my enemies. Vumi over there is busy planning and scheming, thinking that he can get me off the island. Never mind though. I will win this and take home $2 million. We're gonna be rich, Papa.
Rich Kupiwana Bonani, are you doing that thing again? Come and get your dinner, Mr. Fake Diary Sessions. We're now on Survivor. Oh, the world will fall.
Catch Survivor Season 40, Winners at War. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Starts 27 February on S3. Open up.
Defending WAFCON champions are tackling Mehaladitwe in another glittering international friendly. Both nations describe their first match as the first half. Will Banyana Dr. Ellis dominate this 90 minutes, or will the beautiful flowers conquer the pitch battle? Witness the on-field grudge between Apa Makelwane, South Africa versus Lesotho on Tuesday 25 February at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 2. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Thulasizwe Simelane on the Morning Brief. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
So, a follow-up on a conversation we started yesterday. There have been varying responses to the recommendation by an Eastern Cape High Court judge that alcohol should have warning labels for its contribution to gender-based violence and violent crime. Some stakeholders say it is crucial that alcohol products carry explicit warning labels informing consumers of these harmful consequences, empowering individuals with the knowledge of its dangers. Let's speak to Lakin Timane, who is the convener of the National Liquor Traders Council. Good morning to you, Lucky. Thank you for your time. So you heard the conversation. It comes out of the Eastern Cape Division of the High Court in Makanda. In the course of passing sentence, the judge says we need clearer labels that make the link directly to the instances of gender-based violence and the consumption and abuse of alcohol. Do you as an industry agree to this?
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Thulasizwe, and good morning to SFM listeners. Look, we have read, obviously, with concern, the suggestion that we need to look at putting explicit messages to our products. As it were, we have 7 different messages that our products carry. I think what we need to understand, maybe appreciate as an industry, is that we all want the same thing, which is to fight alcohol abuse in our country. But we also need to understand what will have been the impact of the 7 labels that we currently have. Maybe we need to study that and understand if really there's been an impact. If someone consumes an alcohol product that says do not drink and drive, has there been a positive image that comes from such? So we cannot really, I think as a counter rush into emotionally based decisions that have no bearing in science, let alone in common sense.
Is it your argument, Lucky, that the warnings that are there already are not effective? So what good would adding this one about gender-based violence do?
I think cautiously so, Thulasizwe, because we do not want to ever shoot down a suggestion that is going to make a positive impact in how we address the issue of alcohol abuse in our country. So we cannot say that such a suggestion should be shot down. But what we are saying is that let us firstly analyze the 7 different messages that we currently have on our products. Have they really made an impact? If not, why then will we then consider adding some more messaging? Because there is a production capacity that gets affected by having to introduce these labelings. Most of the products that we have in the country are produced outside of our borders. So you have to then have the changes made and effected on those bottles or whatever packaging that they may be carrying that alcohol. So it is not such a simple thing as to say change and then the change then happens. But let's first understand what are the current messagings doing in the context of South Africa and how we fight the issue of alcohol abuse something that we fully agree needs to be attended to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Lucky, but I think I read somewhere, I think I read somewhere that part of the challenge with the current labels is that, one, the producers of alcohol have an option to say, choose one or two, I don't know what the number is, that you will then stick onto your product. And then it's also undercut, if I'm correct in my recollection, it's also undercut by the font size and placement, such that it would seem that the industry really doesn't come to the party with giving those warnings, the 7 that are currently there, the prominence that they deserve.
No, that will not be true, because the labeling size as pushed by government, it's coming at certain standards.
So it's
there's no
regulated.
way that, yes, but also it all goes into all the SKUs. There's the stop keeping units. So many in South Africa will most likely have more than 10,000 units of alcohol products, and come in different sizes. So you'll have your 150 ml, 200 ml, and all those carry messaging, and the messaging will be in line with what the size ought to be for that specific product line. So it's not that the industry is not playing its part,
Gotcha.
but also if you look at the issue of gender-based violence, this is something that the industry has actually taken it upon themselves. We launched in 2020 when we saw it necessary as a result of the statistics that spoke to the gender-based violence emanating from COVID-19, where we launched Tavern Dialogues on gender-based violence. So to say that maybe the industry doesn't care on issues of gender-based violence would be very misleading. In fact, if you look at the crime stats, almost 11 to 12% of sexual violence crimes, linked crimes, could be linked directly to alcohol. So we do not have to spend time addressing the 11%. Let us also look at the 89% that causes people to commit such heinous crimes in our country. But we, as the industry, we take that full responsibility on the 11%, and we're working on programs to ensure that we address this matter from our side.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time this morning. That's Lakin Timane. He's the convener of the National Liquor Traders Council, weighing in on that debate that's been raging about whether or not alcohol products should carry a prominent label that makes a direct link between incidents of alcohol use and abuse and incidents of gender-based violence, as has been argued by that judge in the Eastern Cape Division of the High Court in Makhanda. And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Morning Brief. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your engagement this morning. The Talking Point with Kethi Motlatlana is up next here on SAFM after the news. Essential Cover from Outsurance pays out claims in cash, allowing you to choose your own panel beater. SMS CAR to 43187 now.
In our top stories, Nafi's Modak to continue testimony in the Western Cape High Court, and Motsoaledi criticised for remarks on private health care. Good morning. Alleged underworld figure Nafi's Modak is expected to continue his testimony in the Western Cape High Court this morning. Modak and 14 co-accused are facing over 100 charges. They include the murder of anti-gang unit detective Charles Kinnear. Yesterday, Modak's defense counsel was taken to task for wanting to present inadmissible evidence. The evidence his counsel had planned to present pertains to voice notes alleged to be between Modak and other people, as well as photocopies of WhatsApp messages. The documentation is also believed to include police-compiled reports. The South African Medical Association Trade Union, SAMATU, has criticized the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, for attributing the high cost of private health care to a lack of regulation. In a media briefing yesterday, the minister delivered the Health Market Inquiry report. It revealed widespread deterioration of benefits as well as expensive and rising costs of healthcare and medical scheme cover. He claimed this was a result of a lack of regulation of the healthcare industry. SAMATU's General Secretary is Dr. Cedric Sihlangu.
What we find a bit unfortunate is that the minister, being the Minister of Health, is vested with the authority to be the one that is responsible for healthcare in the country, both private and public healthcare. So there's no Minister of Public Health. So you can't have a convenient argument where you come back later and say, well, there are no regulations. So the question is, who is responsible for putting in place regulations? A simple answer is in the National Health Act. It's the Department of Health, it's the Minister of Health. So these regulations ought to have been in place all these years to prevent the escalating costs, and that was never done.
Bold one, South Africa is not convinced that the Gauteng government's decision to allow Eskom and City Power to take over the Mfuleni and Ekenhof pump station will work. Premier Panyaza Lesufi said the aim was to ensure that the two pump stations had electricity to avoid the water challenges in the province. He delivered his State of the Province address yesterday. Bold one, South Africa's Ayanda Ali says Johannesburg City Power and Eskom are already struggling to keep the lights on.
He goes on to say there's a war room that's been established between City Power and Eskom that is going to try and make sure that the pumps that are being vandalized are able to process water. This is the same City Power that has slapped residents of Johannesburg with load reduction. This is the same Eskom that has hit us now with load shedding, and they are now entrusted to deliver on providing power to pump stations.
Teams have continued to battle several fires in the Witzenberg area in the Western Cape. The fires started more than a week ago. Cape Winelands District Municipality spokesperson Joanne Otters says the fires in the Wellington area are not fully contained. No injuries have been reported. Otters says they are concerned strong winds could reignite some fires.
Today is day 8 of firefighting for teams in the Cape Winelands. While the fires in Wellington are now fully contained, work continues in the Witzenberg. There are currently active lines running above the farms of Wakkerstroom, Pietervale, and 2 lines above Skalkenbosch in Tilbach. Teams worked hard in the night. However, the combination of high fuel loads and a stiff breeze drove the fire faster than crews could keep up. Despite difficult conditions, teams managed to protect electricity pylons and a number of properties.
US singer John Legend has told the BBC he's unfazed by a public backlash against his decision to perform in Rwanda, despite the country's involvement in the conflict in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. Following last week's concert in Kigali, he says he does not believe the people of Rwanda should be punished. Critics argued that Legend could have made a powerful statement by pulling out of the concert. Fellow Grammy winner Thames pulled out of a concert she was due to give in Rwanda on Saturday. She says she cannot be insensitive to real-world issues.